I've been a mall security guard for about 4 years when I first met a dude called Craig. Guarding was something that I fell into around 2009 when the job market went and pooped its pants. The pay was okay, I didn't mind working nights, and some of the store clerks used to work us into their 20% employee discount, which was awesome. All my coworkers were pretty laid back too, including the boss. They were just regular guys bringing home a paycheck who didn't go looking for any trouble. But then Craig got hired, and right away, we all knew that he was different. Craig was a short, balding dude with glasses who was either at the end of his 30s or the beginning of his 40s. And word had it that he'd been a security guard ever since he dropped out of high school, and that meant for a while. But you'd never have guessed it from just looking at the guy. He was shy, quiet, and didn't strike me as someone who could handle himself if things got physical. But our boss said that he'd gotten amazing reviews from his references and hadn't taken a sick day in almost 6 years straight. Now, I guess you can't train that kind of a reliability into someone, and you gotta snatch it up where you can find it. So Craig got the job, and it wasn't long before I was working shifts with him. Now, including those in the parking lot, the mall had like 20-something security cameras, meaning a lot of our job was spent sitting in front of a giant bank of screens while watching for shoplifters and car thieves. In the daytime, we were the eyes in the sky, and definitely much more of a reactive force than a proactive one. Night shifts were a different story altogether, but I'll get to that later. So one day, me and Craig are sitting in front of the screens. We can access each individual camera feed from the monitor on our computers, which we use to clip and store footage should we need to. But for the most part, we don't do that unless we've got a good reason to. So when I noticed how Craig was watching this one store without a break, I got kind of curious. When I noticed that he was watching the store that sold clothes and toys for the under fives, I asked if he'd spotted something suspicious. Now, it's kind of sad, but that store was one of the biggest shoplifting spots in the whole mall. I guess the junkies figured out that formula and baby clothes sold fast over at the Hundreds block, so it became a real problem after a while. But then when I asked him, Craig switched over to the camera feed of another store and sort of said something like, "Oh, never mind. It was nothing." Now, I didn't pay it much mind at the time. I did the same thing myself from time to time, but then that same shift, about an hour before clock-out time, I caught him doing it again. And that time, he just straight up denied it. Now, I said something like, "Watching the baby store again, huh?" And then he just sort of flicked over to another store again, saying, "What? No." Now, I somehow got into my head that he had some crush on the girl who worked there, and in all fairness, she was cute, so it did track. I also thought that I had a little theory confirmed when I teased him with the prospect, and he turned as red as a stop sign. Now, I said, "You are into her, aren't you? You gonna ask her out? Come on, do it, dude. Don't be a wuss." He didn't get mad or anything. He just told me to stop while trying to keep a grin off his face. I left him alone, but not enough being like, turns out you're human after all. You're all right, kid." I clocked out maybe an hour or two later, and Craig grinned as I said, "Hey, don't let anyone else catch you crushing on the baby store girl again. They'll think you're stalking her." Over the next month or so, I was on a sort of string of night shifts watching the mall overnight, and 2 of those shifts were spent with Craig. I didn't see him as creepy robot anymore, just a quiet guy who focused on what was in front of him. But I did give him hell about not asking the baby store girl out yet. I told him to live a little, because the worst she could say is no. That's not even like he had to go anywhere near the store during daylight hours either, not unless it was an emergency. But still, all he did was grin and tell me to just buzz off. Now, night shifts were different to days in that we actively patrolled the mall complex once every half hour. Now, one guy would leave the office and take a walk around, while the other stayed behind to watch his back from the screen bank. We wouldn't always keep our eyes glued to the screens, not unless the walker called on the radio. So as Craig was walking around the mall from the 2:30 a.m. patrol, I wasn't paying attention to what he was doing. And not until I happened to look up and see that one of the store's shutters had been partially opened. Now, right away, I radioed over to Craig saying, "Dude, one of the stores is unlocked." And then I had this weird sort of like twin moment of realization as two thoughts hit me at once. Craig wasn't answering his radio, and the store that was open was the baby clothes store. Now right away I'm thinking, uh-oh, Craig's in the baby store, mainly because we were not allowed to just walk into the stores after closing time, not unless something serious is going down. And since Craig was so reliable, I figured that there's no way that he'd be risking his job like that unless there was something wrong. So I grabbed my keys, and off I went to the baby clothes store. Now a few minutes later, I'm ducking under the half-raised shutter, yelling out, "Craig, you in here, buddy?" And immediately he responds, "Yeah, I'm here," and steps out from behind one of the displays. He almost scared the crap out of me, and then I asked what the hell he was doing, and he told me he thought he heard something from inside the store. Now I say, "Dude, why didn't you hit me up on the radio? That's why I'm here." As in, why I was sitting at the screen bank. Now he hears something, he calls it in, and I can see past the shutters and into the store with nothing but a swivel on my chair. So as soon as he said it, I knew his excuse was nonsense, and I reminded him of what he was doing might actually get his butt fired. And it was like dealing with some dumb newbie. Only Craig was not some dumb newbie. He knew the job, and he was pretty good at it, so it made exactly zero sense to me why he was acting the way he was. And so the next night, Craig kind of thanks me for, I don't know, caring about him, I guess. And he thanked me for not telling on him, and he also thanked me for getting him out of that store, which was weird because it was almost like the way an alcoholic might thank you for stopping him from drinking. And I guess that didn't ring the alarm bells that it should have, because at the time I just wanted to know what he was doing in the baby store so late. And that's when he broke eye contact and said something sort of like, I'm gonna be a father. And then right as I'm about to congratulate him, he added, "And I'm scared." I told him something along the lines of, "It's okay to be scared, but I'm sure you'll be fine." But I didn't mean it. Not because I'm the kind to offer empty platitudes, but because I didn't believe him. I'm not saying that I have a particularly advanced bullcrap detector or anything like that. I just don't care how quiet a guy is. If his wife or girlfriend is pregnant, he complains to his buddies at work about it. Even if Craig wasn't the type to complain about it, I didn't buy him not bringing it up before that moment when I confronted him about that store. And I didn't all the way confront him, as in like I didn't call him out on complaining that he was going to be a dad. I just knew that from then on, that he was hiding something, or at least he was maybe hiding something. It was just enough to affect my opinion of him until I knew what that thing was, and when I found out, it was almost like a bomb going off. Craig acted nice and normal for the rest of the time we worked together. I didn't catch him staring at stores, and I didn't catch him in any stores after hours either. He was just Craig. Quiet, weird Craig who lied about having a pregnant baby mama because the next time I asked about it, he totally responded to me saying, "Huh? Oh, yeah, she's fine," when I asked about her. Now, I thought it was weird as hell to lie about something like that, and I hoped that the real reason wasn't like sinister or anything. But that, as it turned out, was nothing but wishful thinking. And on a day when I had to do night shift with Craig, a friend of mine sent a message to the Facebook group chat we shared. Now, the first notification read something like, "Chris sent a video," and then the rest were him sending things like, "Oh my god, LMAO, check out this loser freak." And he used to send tons of stuff like that to the group chat. Weird videos or memes and all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes they were really funny, and other times they made your skin crawl. In this case, the video was most definitely of the skin-crawling variety. When I opened it, all the camera showed was what looked like a kid's room, and then out of nowhere, a grown man dressed as a baby walked into the shot and then turned towards the camera. He was wearing one of those weird baby hats, the bonnets, and some makeup, and had this almost oversized pacifier in his mouth. So at first I didn't recognize him, but he had to take the pacifier out to speak, and when he did, I suddenly realized what I was looking at. It was Craig, the adult baby now babbling about mommy and having a full die-die, and then pretending to cry, saying, "Wah, wah, wah." I remember closing the video, and then just standing there in my kitchen for a second or two, just not really knowing what to do with myself. Obviously, one of the thoughts going through my head was, that's why Craig was in the goddamn baby store. He obviously couldn't wear any of the clothes there, but knowing why he was interested in them made my skin feel like it wanted to crawl off my bones. But then my other thoughts involved stuff like, was Craig dangerous? Was he some kind of PDF file whose thing was dressing up like a baby? I had no idea, and it's not like I wanted to dedicate any brain power to it either. It made me feel uneasy and very queasy thinking about Craig all dressed up like that, but it made me even queasier thinking that I had to spend 10 hours in a shopping mall with him, completely alone. I ended up calling my buddy Chris, the one who sent the video, to ask where he'd found it and how many people he'd sent it to. He said someone from his job sent it to him and that he'd sent it to just about everyone he knew, with obvious exceptions for family. Now that meant the video was going around town, so it wasn't going to be long until Craig got recognized for being the giant man baby in it. And while a heck of a lot of people were going to laugh their butts off at him, I knew that there would be people that thought he was a predator and would want to hurt him. But was he a predator? Or was he just some harmless weirdo? Now that was the real question, so that night while we were at work, I decided to just ask him about it. It was probably one of the most awkward and creepy exchanges of my entire life, and it took me like 3 hours to work up to it too. I wasn't scared of Craig, at least I wasn't physically intimidated by him, but if I confronted him on what was no doubt a deep, dark secret, what was to stop him from freaking out and pulling a knife on me or something? Even if he didn't and just straight up denied all knowledge, spending the rest of my shift with him was going to be awkward as hell, so it was definitely a period where I thought to myself, just mind your own business and let whatever happens happen. But I couldn't, and in the end, I asked him. The second I said, "Hey Craig, I saw this video today," he turned even redder than I had asked him if he had a crush. Now, I cut myself off after the day and just watched his reaction to sort of gauge it, and I swear to God, Craig started sweating right there in front of me. I told him I figured that he knew which video I was talking about, but he didn't move and he didn't say anything. He just stayed sat in his chair, eyes locked on the screen bank, swearing and shaking like he was coming down with some fever. I guess I didn't really know where to go from there. He'd already admitted it silently, but it was an admission all the same. And I don't think I expected him to do anything but deny it till he was blue in the face. And so once I had the admission, I went to what I considered the most important question of all, which was, "Craig, are you a weirdo for kids?" And then, and only then, did I get a reaction. His head spun around and he says, "No, it's not like that, dude. I swear to God, I'm not." It was a very strong reaction and one that had a pinch of outrage to it, and not the kind of please believe me that you get when someone is lying to save their skin. Now, I guess I never truly know for sure, but in the moment, his answer, it rang true and I believed him, but that still left the question of what the hell was he doing making those videos? And I guess it might sound a bit weird, but I kind of backed off on wanting to know why. I mean, I could probably take a shot in the dark and it wouldn't be too far off, but even if I knew, it wouldn't change anything. Craig was weird. Really weird, actually, but as far as I knew, he was harmless, and I actually kind of liked the guy too, so there was that. And then, because I liked him, I knew he didn't deserve what was definitely coming his way, and I told him to quite literally get the hell out of town. And Craig knew it too. He knew that once people saw that video, and knew the guy who made it was a security guard down at the mall, it wasn't just his job he'd be in danger of losing. And so even though his record was clean and I didn't personally believe that he was some kind of diddler, the best thing for him to do was leave town and start over someplace else. And once I was done giving my speech, Craig looked like he was searching for the right words, and then he burst into tears out of nowhere, and he didn't stop crying for a good couple of minutes. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't feel too bad for him. Uploading videos like that was dumb as hell, and it was only a matter of time before someone recognized him. But his dumb mistake had ruined his life, or at least it was going to ruin his life if he didn't find someplace far away to live and fast. Well, that was the last I saw of Craig. When we clocked out, he thanked me for letting him know that his video was going viral and then told me that I might not see him around much anymore. I told him I was sorry to hear that, but it was for the best. He needed a fresh start someplace else, and he needed to fix whatever needed fixing so he didn't feel the need to put that kind of crap online. Because it was either going to get him hurt, or, this was half the reason I felt very little sympathy for him, I felt like whatever his thing was specifically, it had the potential to turn into something dangerous. Like maybe he was telling the truth when I asked him if he wasn't some kid like her or not, but people change, right? For better and for worse. And a dude who dresses up like a baby and chooses to do so in some skimpy little diaper thing and not like a onesie, that stuff's gotta have the potential to get worse. I don't care what anyone says, and I say that as a father of 2 daughters. Craig was gone by the time everyone realized what he was posting. All our coworkers either got sent the video directly or they got told about it at work. And so Craig's reputation was just about obliterated come the end of the week. Our boss said it was good that he got the hell out of town because he'd have fired his butt if he tried to stick around. And there was a lot of hate towards Craig like that, and I get it. But all I really feel anymore when I think about him is fear. I hope he's doing okay and that he found a good woman or man or whatever and settled down, because one of the alternatives is that he didn't get himself together and he got worse. And then if he gets worse, maybe he'll do something terrible with a kid or a baby. And then it'll kind of be my fault for not taking him around the back of the mall and shooting him when I had the goddamn chance. I've worked in medical science for nearly 20 years now, mostly as a lab technician, but also as a coordinator and principal investigator. And many years ago now, I used to work in a small medical clinic in the Greater London area. We mostly ran blood and urine tests, and while we had an x-ray room and a few other things too, it was 95% blood and urine week in and week out. And as you can imagine, we're exceptionally careful when handling samples. I can't imagine many of you have received calls saying, we misplaced that blood you gave us, can you come back and give us some more? And that's because we're really careful with them. And so one day, when one of our nurses came to us saying that he dropped our sample, our first thought was concern, and not for the bloody sample, but for him. Now, I don't want to use his real name because that'll give away which clinic this took place in, so I'll just call him Dave. And when Dave dropped a sample, I was worried that he might not be feeling well. When I asked him what happened, Dave said that the beaker dropped from his grip after he suddenly became lightheaded. So we sent him home for 2 days, then he came back feeling much better. Now, Dave was a great nurse, an asset to the clinic, and God knows we wanted to look after him. So a couple of weeks later, when it happened for a second time, I recommended that he just go to the doctors for a full checkup. Dizzy spells can be a sign of some pretty nasty illnesses, but following a full medical exam, he was told that there was nothing wrong with him. We were relieved, why wouldn't we be? Not to mention, Dave did admit to skipping breakfast on the day of the second spill. So once again, it passed without too much suspicion, and Dave continued to work at the clinic. But then came the day that I walked in on him doing something that I told myself was impossible, and it felt like I was hit by a train. We trusted Dave to be alone with the samples, so it wasn't in the least bit unusual for him to be left alone and uninterrupted for sometimes long periods of time. So when I walked into the containment lab, I caught him by surprise, just as he was lowering a sample beaker of urine from his mouth. I froze. He froze. Then he dropped the beaker to the floor and mumbled something like, I dropped it. But it was too late. I'd seen everything, and there was no unseeing it either. Dave begged me not to tell anyone. He swore that he'd never do it again, and even offered me money to keep quiet. But what else could I do? To say his behavior constituted gross misconduct would be putting it mildly, and we simply couldn't have anyone with such inclinations around the clinic. End of story. As you can imagine, it was quite a big deal, but all the General Medical Council was interested in was keeping it out of the papers. So when Dave just sort of disappeared, it suited everyone just fine. It was the end of our problem, but not the end of his problem because procedure stated that we pass on what we'd learned to the police. Dave had broken laws pertaining to the mishandling of biological materials, which covers everything from blood to stool samples. It was unlikely that he'd be locked up. A first offense would get him a fine and suspended sentence at most, so we were told, but he'd never be able to work in the health service ever again. His life as he knew it was over. But to be fair, he probably should have thought about that before he decided to take a shot of piss right as I walked in. Now anyway, life moves on without Dave, and although we missed his skills and experience, we did not miss the feeling of knowing that there was someone like that working amongst us. I think it was like 6 or 7 weeks, long enough that we'd almost let the whole sorry episode slip from our minds, or at least I personally almost had anyway. And then one day, after driving home from work, a car pulled into my driveway behind me, having followed me home from the clinic to block me in. Now, I knew who it was the moment I saw the car. I'd seen that car almost every day in the clinic's car park for almost 3 years. It was Dave's car, and he had followed me home. He walked down my driveway towards me as I got out of my car, shouting at him to get away from my house before I called the police. Now, I made such a racket that my husband actually came out, and our kids watched from the front window as he walked Dave back up the driveway. He wasn't polite about it either, neither of them were, and Dave only started to back off once my husband had promised to bounce his head off the concrete. We reported him to the police, but since Dave was out on bail, there wasn't much that they could do unless they caught him in the act of actually threatening us. All they could do as it stood was warn him to stay away from me, or his attempts to do so would constitute harassment. But it didn't stop him, and things only got worse. It all culminated with Dave trying to drive me off the road one evening when I was on my way home from work. I knew I was in trouble from the second I looked in my rear view and saw his car in the road behind me. I just didn't think that he was mental enough to try and scare me in such a dangerous situation. I don't think he wanted me dead. Or maybe he did, who knows. But if I think he really wanted to murder me, he could have done it with a knife come closing time at the clinic. However, that didn't make what he did any less frightening because his reckless driving ended up with me careening off the road and into a ditch. I wasn't hurt, not too bad anyway, but I did need to go to the hospital to get checked out just in case. It was a horrible experience, but like many dark clouds, it did have a silver lining. Dave's dangerous driving had been caught on several cameras, meaning he was swiftly arrested and kept on remand before his trial since it was deemed that he was a threat to the public. That new dangerous driving charge meant prison was now on the cards, and although he only got 3 months for all the offenses he racked up, it was still 3 months where we could all feel safe again. He didn't bother coming back to do anything, not to my house or to the clinic. He did 3 months of a 6-month sentence, meaning any other offense would have him recalled to prison. Now, I was appalled at what a light sentence he got at first, but now I actually appreciate how smart it was. 3 months is nothing to sniff at for a first-time lag, and then the prospect of another 3 months in jail was enough to deter Dave from any further threatening interactions. And it's a bloody good thing that he didn't turn up at our house again, because I swear my husband would have done time for murder.
I'm standing in my driveway, that first weekend after New Year's, watching my whole family turn down the cul-de-sac into a motorsports parade. Trucks idle inside a line, trailers sit loaded with a brand new Razor and side-by-sides, all shiny plastic and knobby tires meant for tearing through the mountain snow. Kids weave in between them like we're heading to a theme park, instead of some kind of frozen campsite. Jake slaps the fender of his truck. "You ready or what?" About as ready as I'm gonna be," I say back. Winter camping is something we've all done for years now. If the temperatures aren't too deadly and the roads aren't completely buried, we pack half our houses and then head up the mountain. This year the snow came a little early, 2 feet high, but the weather is mild enough to keep that tradition alive. Everybody's excited and everybody's over-prepared. I finish checking the straps on our side-by-side. Erin stands over by the passenger door, bundled up tightly, breath curling off in the cold. "You packed the emergency kit, right?" she asked me. "Yup, first aid, blankets, flares, heaters in the tote with the propane." She nods but then keeps staring at the mountains, a gray spine behind the houses. "Roads were plowed yesterday, right?" "So they say." Of course, the kids were already arguing about who gets the first ride when we reach camp. My parents, my sisters, their spouses, they're all packing coolers, snacking firewood, debating coffee versus beer ratios, like we aren't bringing a ton of both. It's supposed to be this nice big family weekend, controlled chaos. We've used the same campsite for years and years now. We know the same turnoffs, the washouts, the meadow where we dig out this fire pit into the snow. It's all pretty routine. Jake tugs on his gloves. You got some chains if the road turns nasty? Yeah, they're in the toolbox, I say. You think we'll need them? Well, that's up to the mountain to decide, isn't it? It's a joke, but it doesn't land with me, and I shake it off. I start the truck up, raise my voice so the whole convoy hears me. Same drill as always. I lead, Jake runs rear, keep your distance. We regroup at the cattle guard. The engines rumble to their agreement. Erin buckles in. Last chance to bail, she says over to me. And I pull out anyway, our caravan falling in behind me, heading straight toward the mountain and whatever's waiting inside those trees. We hit the dirt road just past that cattle guard, where the snow starts climbing in these uneven ridges along the shoulders. Our convoy regroups like we always do, engines idling, exhaust rolling around the tires, spirits are still really high. I take point again and lead us deeper off into the mountains. The snow gets thicker, the trees lean in, heavy with frost, narrowing the road to a single white corridor. A few miles up, I started seeing some fresh tire tracks, wide and aggressive tread marks, punching through the snow right ahead of us. Probably some other campers or off-roaders. It's nothing too unusual. But then I catch some movement off in the trees, an old dark truck that was mud-caked, loud, and cuts through this uneven marked trail to our right, tearing through the pines. Whoever's driving it is hammering it like they're trying to break something. I lift my hand off the wheel and wave, but the truck doesn't wave back, doesn't even acknowledge me. It just slows, stops, and then watches us roll past. Erin shifts beside me. Well, that's comforting. When we take the next bend, the truck pulls out behind our convoy and starts following. I didn't announce it yet, but I watched in my mirrors. It stays close enough to make its point, but far enough to pretend that it isn't doing what it's doing. Finally, we reach the turnoff to our usual winter spot, this nice open meadow tucked between tall stands of timber. I swing in and everybody falls behind, piling out to check the snow depth and pick a tent spot. And that's when that same truck rolls into the meadow behind us. Two guys inside, both leaning out their window, wearing the same pissed off expression. We were headed here, the driver calls out. This is our site. Jake then stepped forward immediately. Yeah, that's not how it works. First come, first serve, man. You just watched us roll in. The passenger shakes his head. We told people that we were taking this spot. Ask around. Everybody knows that we use this one. Look, there's a whole mountain behind you, I say. We're here with kids. Let's not make this into a thing, you know? They stare us down for a long moment, and something smug creeps into their faces. But they back out, spit gravel, and drive away. We watch until they're finally gone, but that tension remains. It doesn't dissipate. But I force myself to shake it off. We set up camp, pop some tents, and dig out a fire pit. We unload all the toys immediately. After a while, Erin and I take the side-by-side out for a short loop. The trails out here are beautiful, quiet and bright, very untouched. And for a little while, I legitimately did forget all about the drama. But when we return, everybody else is rolling back too, and the mood has definitely changed. Jake marches right up to me, helmet in hand. Those guys found us. Found you? What do you mean? They cut us off at the ridge trail, kept circling through bottles, full ones, I might add, tried to run the kid's razor into the wash. My stomach dropped. Is anybody hurt? No, but he doesn't even finish that sentence because an engine then roars through the tree line, getting closer at a speed that promises injury, perhaps even death. The truck then bursts out of the woods, right through our camp. It misses a tent by inches, plows through the edge of a fire pit, sending coals up in this spray of sparks. Kids scream and dive for cover, adults scatter, and somebody yanks a toddler behind a trailer. I shout at them, waving both arms. Jake's beside me doing the same. The truck fishtails, spins, almost clips our gear trailer, then guns it again for another loop, before it then rips back into the forest. Silence hangs around us. Everybody erupts though, checking kids, grabbing gear, yelling over one another. I look at Jake. We cannot let them get another run like that. Agreed. We load the kids into the trucks and the SUVs, lock them inside. Adults form this loose perimeter. Aaron and my sisters gather anything that can be turned into a projectile or flattened. My dad keeps saying that we should go, but the light is dropping fast and navigating the descent in the dark with the trailers is a gamble of its own. I try calling the Rangers, but of course, no signal, so I try again, and of course, still nothing. The sun bleeds out behind the ridge, the temperature is dropping fast, and the woods are going dark fast too. The whole mountain feels like it's closing in around us. Jake then mutters to me, "If they come back in the dark." "They will," I say, pretending otherwise is kind of pointless. We stoke the fire, get lamps set up, and try to look organized, but nobody's relaxed. Nobody's sitting. Everybody keeps glancing toward that tree line, like the darkness itself is watching us. Because those guys didn't leave, and we knew damn well they're gonna come back at any moment. Night then settles over the mountain. The fire threw this weak circle of light across the snow, but everything beyond it looked like a wall of moving black. Nobody was even talking anymore. Nobody was pretending this was normal. I kept my Micro 9 tucked into my jacket pocket. I've never really been the type of guy to carry a gun around the camp, but after that second run through, yeah, I'm not taking any chances. Not with my wife, my daughter, or any of the kids we had tucked inside the trucks. We dragged every fallen log that we could find into a loose barricade around camp, a horseshoe of thick trunks and stumps. It wouldn't really stop a determined driver, but it would force the truck to slow enough for us to react or to shoot. Everybody stayed close to the fire, eyes on the tree line. Shadows were twitching off in the dark, snow drifting from the branches, and every sound promised danger. After dinner, the kids were roasting marshmallows. The adults stood guard, shifting from foot to foot to stay warm. My nerves were completely shot, and then I heard off in the distance an engine revving, low, hunting. "They're back," Jake said quietly, and we all froze. The truck then burst from the trees with no headlights, engine screaming. It fishtailed through the dark, tearing up the snow, circling wildly as if to get its bearings. They didn't know about the logs, at least not yet. "All right, get ready," I said, stepping forward with Jake beside me. The truck turned sharply, lined up with our firelight, and it came straight at camp. It hit that first log at full speed. The front end folded inward with a metallic crunch, steam blasting up in white plumes. The whole vehicle bucked upward, then slammed down into place. The engine kept revving, but the truck was not going anywhere. The doors then flew open on both sides. Both men jumped out screaming that, "You're paying for that! You're paying for all of it!" "Nah," Jake said. "That looks like a you problem." They then took a couple of steps toward us, yelling, still furious. The kids that we put inside the truck started crying. Their wives were yelling at them to be quiet, that it's okay. But I had had enough. I raised that Micro 9 and fired 2 shots into the air. The cracks split off into the night, echoing off the trees, cutting their shouting clean off. "Back the fuck up," I said. "Get in your truck and leave. Step 1 foot closer and you're not going home. You're going in a dusty fucking hole in the ground beside me." Their faces twisted, but fear finally slipped behind their eyes. They laughed it off and staggered back into the crumpled truck. It took them 3 tries to slam the door shut. The engine coughed, whined, and finally limped forward. The shredded front end scraped across the snow as they turned and crawled off into the woods, disappearing the same way they came. None of us really slept that night. 2 days later, when we finally packed up and headed down the mountain, we found their truck pulled off the side of the main road, hood open, windshield cracked, tires bald, and abandoned. We didn't stop. We didn't look inside. Whoever those men were, I hope you stay there. Back in college, I was 20 and broke and willing to believe anyone who said something with confidence. And that's exactly how I ended up on a mountain with 4 other people, half prepared and overly macho, thinking it would be a nice, cheap little getaway. It started with Marissa, my girlfriend at the time. We were in our drafty apartment, eating some leftovers and scrolling on our phones when she got a message from our friend Corey. Long weekend, Zeke says winter camping is easy mode. Wanna go? I remember snorting at easy mode in January, but Marissa was already smiling at her phone, already sort of sold on the idea. We didn't have anything else to do, and a road trip did sound better than sitting around campus drowning inside boredom. Corey and her boyfriend James were our usual hangout couple. Late night grocery runs, drinking cheap beer on weeknights, complaining about class loads, and, your standard college friends. The wild card in the mix was Zeke, a new addition. He was older than us by a couple of years, supposedly from Montana, all with these stories about surviving blizzards and outrunning moose. He always wore the same beat-up Carhartt every single time. "Winter's perfect," he said the night that we all met up. "Snow's deep but manageable. Air's clean. No other campers around. You're gonna love it." He talked like this a lot though, with this steady, confident tone that made it easy just to kind of nod along. I didn't know him that well, but Marissa trusted Corey and Corey trusted Zeke, and I guess that was enough to get the rest of us moving. He sketched out this rough plan on a napkin at the bar, drive a couple of hours outside of town, hit a Forest Service road, hike 30 minutes to a clearing by a river, plenty of wood, good shelter from the wind. He even had spare sleeping pads and an extra tent. I'll admit, I got a little uneasy listening to him rattle off everything so perfectly, but maybe that was just my lack of experience. I'd only camped a few times before this and always in decent weather. "Come on," Marissa said later, nudging me. "It'll be fun. We need a break from everything." And so that was that. 5 of us heading deep into the snow on a long weekend, following a guy that we barely even knew. He wasn't entirely wrong. That trip did start off pretty simple. It just didn't stay that way. The drive out there felt really long. Zeke's old truck led the way, rattling confidently through stretches of unplowed road. Marissa and I following behind in my Honda, which slid every few seconds on packed ice. "It feels like we're driving off the map," Marissa said at one point. And she wasn't wrong. The trees were pressing in, snowbanks rose chest high, and the sky turned that pale winter blue that makes everything look Arctic. By the time we reached the trailhead, my nerves were shot. Zeke then hopped out, hands on his hips. "Perfect snowpack," he said. "Couldn't ask for any better." Corey looked at him like he just read some kind of poetry, and James looked exhausted from the drive itself. We quickly strapped on some packs and followed Zeke down this narrow trail through knee-deep powder. The cold stung my nose almost immediately. After 30 minutes or so, we reached the clearing, a flat spot near a slow, dark stretch of river. It was beautiful in that harsh winter catalog kind of way. We went straight to work though, clearing out 10 spots, stomping down drifts, piling up wood to dry. My gloves soaked through immediately and my toes numbed even faster. Zeke though, seemed made for this. He chopped firewood with clean, practical swings, humming to himself. Corey hovered near him the whole time, laughing at everything he was saying. Marissa seemed to notice too, and she gave me that quick side eye. I nodded. It was weird. Still, by mid-afternoon, camp felt solid. 3 tents were now up, fire was roaring, smoke curling straight into this windless sky. We thawed our gloves over the flames and let ourselves pretend that we were seasoned winter campers out here. We wandered around building this lopsided snowman, climbed on the rocks by the river, and let that day drift by us. It almost felt normal. As the sun dropped behind the trees, the temperature dropped as well. We cooked dinner, burned some sausage and canned chili, and rinsed the dishes with handfuls of snow. Our breath hung in the air around us, and then Zeke reached into his pack and pulled out this bottle of whiskey. "Camping fuel," he said. "Let's warm up." The firelight made that liquid glow golden. Corey howled, threw an arm around him, and took the first shot. James looked uncomfortable but drank anyway. Marissa sipped hers, and then I took the bottle, but flicked the neck behind a log when nobody was looking. I wasn't about to get drunk in sub-zero weather with no cell service, but everybody else here was already sliding downhill fast. The more they drank, the more Corey clung to Zeke, leaning close, brushing his shoulder, whispering things that made him grin. James tightened his jaw and stared into the fire like he was trying to move it with his mind. Marissa kept shifting uneasily beside me. "This is getting messy," she whispered, and I agreed. The jokes got louder, the fire crackled higher, snow drifted in these nice lazy flakes. Zeke went on and on about blizzards that he'd survived, mountains he'd climbed, nights he spent alone in terrain that would kill softer men. And Corey was right there, laughing at every word. James finally stood up and muttered that, "I'm going to bed," stumbled into the tent without looking at anybody else. Marissa and I followed shortly after. When I zipped our tent shut, Zeke and Corey were still up, shoulders touching, still talking. Inside, the cold pressed in from every direction, our breath fogging the air. Marissa curled up close and whispered, "Something bad's brewing." And she wasn't wrong. I must have fallen asleep at some point because the next thing I knew, she was shaking my arm really hard. "Do you hear that?" At first, all I caught was scuffling, thuds, snapping twigs, heavy breathing, then shouting, then a sharp cry followed. I unzipped the tent, freezing air slapping me awake. The fire outside was blazing again, throwing this flickering orange light over the clearing. 3 figures were rolling in the snow, naked: Corey, Zeke, and James. "What the hell?" Marissa said. James was on top of Zeke, swinging wildly, screaming fragments of words that we couldn't quite make out. Corey was clawing at him, sobbing, slipping in the snow, drunk and hysterical. I rushed forward and grabbed James's arm, tried to yank him back, but his whole body shook. I heard them. Thought it was you two, then she wasn't there, she was in his tent." It clicked together in an instant. He'd woken up to the sound of, sex, assuming it was us, realized Corey was gone and followed the noise to Zeke's tent. Then he fucking lost it. Zeke shoved him off, scrambling backwards, yelling to back up, while trying to cover himself with one arm. Corey sobbed even harder. I planted myself between them, yelling for everybody to stop, to breathe, to get their heads on straight, but nobody was hearing anything. For a moment, all 3 just stared at one another, drunk, shaking, and freezing, lit by the firelight. This whole scene in front of me felt unreal. James was the first to break. His breath came out in these ragged clouds. He staggered back when he finally realized he was barefoot and standing in a freezing clearing, miles from anywhere else. "You know what?" he said, voice flat. I'm done with all of this. Fuck both of you." He didn't look at Corey, didn't look at Zeke either, just scooped up his clothes from where they landed in the snow and stumbled off toward the trailhead and disappeared in the dark. A minute later, his truck engine fired up, grinding, coughing, then revving. Headlights swept across the trees and vanished. And just like that, he was gone. The silence that followed after that was brutal. Corey collapsed in the snow on her hands and knees, shivering and crying softly. Zeke stood over her, arms wrapped around himself, face rich with anger and embarrassment. Marissa then came up behind me, clutching her coat close, her eyes very wide. "What do we do?" she whispered to me. That was a great question that I did not have an answer for. Eventually, Zeke crouched beside Corey, pulling her up gently. She leaned into him without saying a word, still half sobbing, and he guided her toward the tent. They both disappeared inside without looking back. Marissa and I retreated back to ours, neither of us really sleeping, just kind of laying there in the cold, listening to the fire crack and pop outside, listening for footsteps that never came back. Every time the tent rustled in the wind, I thought James had actually come back, but he didn't. Morning came gray and bitter. The fire had burned down to nothing. The clearing looked wrecked. Footprints everywhere, clothes scattered, streaks in the snow from the fight last night. Corey emerged from Zeke's tent wrapped in a blanket, face puffy, eyes hollow. When she realized what had happened, really realized it, sober, she completely broke. She cried so hard she couldn't breathe. Zeke tried to comfort her, but she pushed him away and just kept sobbing into her palms. Nobody really said much during that hike out, no jokes, no small talk. Just the sound of our boots sinking into the snow and Corey's quiet crying behind us. The whole trip back felt like walking away from a scene of a crime. And I bet you can probably guess this part, but we never hung out with any of them again. Not together, not even separately. It all just kind of ended. Sometimes when the winter hits and I see fresh snow piling up on rooftops, I think back on that weekend. How close everything came to turning fatal. About the moment that James's silhouette crossed those firelit trees was something that looked a whole lot like a gun. He could have killed Zeke, he could have killed Corey. But he didn't, and I'm glad that he didn't.
My house was built in the 70s. Not particularly new, but not really that old, I guess, too. We moved here in the early 2000s. I don't really know any of the history behind it, but we've always joked that there are ghosts here. Doors slamming, creaking, and things randomly disappearing has always been blamed on ghosts, but around 5 years ago, it started becoming a tad more aggressive, you could say. The sounds of light footsteps in the hallway, scratches from the second floor and inside the wall. Mind you, we have no rodent problem, so it seemed sort of unexplainable to the entire family. Then, one day, around 3 to 4 years ago, I was home alone sitting in the living room when a loud bang appeared from the second floor. It was so loud I was worried that the upstairs cabinet had fallen over on the floor or something. When the bang hit, my lights flickered too and the TV turned off and on. I could feel the shake all the way down the stairs. I went up to check what happened, obviously, and when I did, everything seemed the same. This has happened several times now, and it's almost entirely identical. A loud bang, a shake, flickering lights, but nothing ever seems out of place. What makes this worse too is that you can't hear it when you're upstairs, you can only hear it when you're downstairs. I know that sounds weird, but that's what happens. I've been called on my phone to stop slamming the door so hard when I'm laying silently in my bed and stuff like that, and I haven't heard a thing. In the past year, I've also started seeing things. I might just have imagined things, but at one point I could have swore that I saw a toddler sleeping in my brother's bed. I saw her pretty clearly too. She was young, maybe 3 years. She had long blonde hair and her arm hung over the edge of the bed. When I approached her, she just disappeared. This was probably a year ago, but it still really confuses and spooks me. Then, a few weeks ago, I encountered her again. I was home alone when someone knocked on the door. I was a bit confused as I wasn't expecting anyone. As I approached the hallway, I heard the door closing and I heard a young girl saying, "Hello," like she had just come home and was announcing her being there. I felt chills run down my back, but I still opened the door to look. My brother is 5, and I figured that he might have just come home early or something, but no one was there. Today, I closed the door, like properly shut, and then it just opened a bit again. And when I looked at the open door, it shut again quickly, closed. And now I keep hearing banging sounds from downstairs, and I just don't know what to do. I'm like unironically kind of worried. Also, I don't know if this matters, but the dreams that I get in this house are always so vivid compared to when I'm not at home. Sometimes I wake up with the sheets off my bed and blanket as well because I sleep so uneasy, I guess. Anyways, I could really do with some advice. I don't think speaking to whatever this is works. I tried, and I guess maybe things stopped being so noisy for a bit, but then it would just start up again, and that's been a bit of a theme for this whole thing. So yeah, if you have any advice, then please do let me know. Me, my best friend, her girlfriend, and my boyfriend were walking home from dinner and stopped at a 7-Eleven. My boyfriend wanted a couple of beers. We waited outside while he got what he needed. As we were outside, I noticed a girl with a backpack walking around the parking lot. She walked up to another girl who was on her phone, and girl number 2 said to whoever she was talking to, "Yeah, my homegirl here, 1 second," and proceeded to tell girl 1 to go and sit in a car occupied by a large white male while she went inside. I noticed the male and the girl number 1 kept looking at us from the car while girl number 2 stayed on the phone inside. I specifically noticed that the male said something and pointed, and girl number 1 laughed while looking at us. Here's where it gets sketchy too. Girl number 1 gets out of the car and comes up to my friend and asks her if she has a pen and a paper. She told her that she has a pen but no paper, and we didn't have any either. And here's how the conversation went after she received the pen. Girl number 1 said, "Where do you live? The trailer park behind here?" No, but nearby. Girl number 1 said, "Oh, okay, well, my grandmother lives there. Where do you work?" My friend said the name of a work girl, and she said, "Oh, really? I know that place. My sister used to work there. What's your name again? You look familiar." My friend tells her name. She says, "Oh, yeah, I think I know you. I knew you looked familiar." My friend has never seen her before, mind you. The girl says, "So how far until you're home?" At this point, my boyfriend came out of the store. The moment that he did, the girl instantaneously wrapped up the conversation and quickly retreated back to the car, saying, "Well, thanks for the pen," not even returning it. Nor did she write anything the entire time. She also kept trying to touch my friend. I did notice that, specifically at her wrists. The girl also had a hospital band on and was saying that she had depression or something. I noticed the man watching the entire interaction and said something to the girl the minute that she opened the car door. He seemed sort of frustrated with her, maybe. But they watched us until we walked off, maybe a minute or two later. They proceeded to sit in the car for at least 3 minutes. At least that's how long it took until they were out of my sight. Probably longer since they made no effort to pull off. But the whole thing just seemed, I don't know, really sketchy and weird. Has anyone heard of anything like this before? I'm especially worried as my friend doesn't have a car and walks everywhere, so there's a good chance that she may be back there at some point. Should we be worried? So I was a security guard for this local company in my area. I was assigned to a water park with another guard who was regularly there keeping watch. He was to train me and show me around and tell me what codes open what doors, stuff like that. But I first noticed how quick he was to enter and leave the property, that he never wanted to spend more than like 10 minutes inside the property before he would be eager to leave. Our first night was simple. There was nothing exciting or interesting going on, so our night dragged a bit. After a few hours, I asked him if he'd experienced anything unusual while working here. He told me that he's had some problems with people trying to enter the property without permission, but that's about it. He also told me that he hated working there because of his encounters with these people. He said that they creeped him out because of just how sneaky they were. He didn't really want to tell me much because he was afraid that I would leave the post. That should have been a red flag for me, but I was too excited to let anything like that scare me. A few more hours later and our shift is over, so we check out and go home for the day. The next night, my boss calls me to explain that the security guard, my partner, had resigned. I must admit that I was a little bit upset about that because now I have to work a 2-man post all by myself with barely any knowledge on the place. Anyway, fast forward a few weeks, I started to get the hang of things and created my own routine with no issues at all. There were no break-ins, no vandalism, nothing. It's now 2 a.m. and I was outside at the front of the property completing my rounds when I heard a door slam from inside. I jumped because of how loud it was, and as I started to walk back into the property, I continued to hear doors opening and closing. I could feel myself getting nervous because it was my first situation that I've ever had at this place. As I walk inside and started to check the doors and complete a round to make sure that there was no one on the property, I get to this corridor where there was a set of stairs that led down to a door that was wide open. I gingerly walked down the stairs to close and lock the door because I was too scared to take a look inside. But as I turned around to head back up the stairs, I noticed a man dressed in all black standing at the top of the stairs. I take a step back and realize that I'm cornered, and if he was to try anything, I would have nowhere to run or hide. So I politely asked him if he needed any help, and he didn't reply. I then asked him how he got into the property. He still didn't reply. He slowly turned his head and snapped his fingers, and then from the left side of the staircase, another man slowly crawled to his side like a dog on all fours. And at that, I turned around and kicked the door open and ran inside and locked myself in a bathroom. I did this as I called my boss and told him what I'd witnessed. They sent an armed security guard to my position to complete a walkthrough to make sure that I was safe. As I got the call that the area was clear, I came out and told them everything from start to finish. I realized that they didn't believe me, so I clocked out and went home for the night. The next morning, I received a call from my boss explaining that they had checked the security footage from the night before, and what they told me horrified me. Every hour when I would complete my rounds inside the property, those same two men would follow me through the facility as if they were stalking me, like as if it was a game to them. After that, I asked for a new position because I was too horrified to work at that water park. I now know why my trainer didn't want to work there anymore too, and this actually happened to me. I have more creepy stories like this from when I was working security, so if you want to hear them, I'd be happy to share them, but thanks for listening, and it's good to finally get this off my chest. When I was in my early days of my career and joined an internship in a small town, a few of us were housed by the company that we worked for in a modified apartment. But they basically had joined two apartments together, so there were 3 bedrooms and a bathroom on each side, with a really, really long corridor in between. Now, towards the end of the assignment, we had a group presentation, so the bunch of us living on our side, we worked on the presentation together, decided to head very early into the office and practice. As per our plans made the previous evening, me and this girl called Simna woke up first around 4:30, so we could use the 2 bathrooms each and get ready. I didn't mind using the bathroom at the other end of the corridor, so I collected my toiletries and headed that way. Simna was doing the same on our side, and we didn't really talk as it was way too early and others were also sleeping. The 2 bedrooms on the other side were empty and one was closed. I assumed that they were sleeping. I set my stuff on the counter and realized quickly that I forgot my bath towel, so came out of the bathroom and saw Simna standing in the middle of the darkened corridor with her back to me. I sort of halted immediately because something seemed very off with the way that she was standing. The hair on my arms was raised up and warning bells went off in my head. I must have made some sound though, because this person turned their head around to look at me. It looked exactly like her, but she was smiling broadly at me, like really smirking. I quickly said, hey, what's going on?" to her, but at the same time sort of backed up into the bathroom where there was light and hot water to use as a weapon, I suppose. I didn't dare come out and I started praying. After around 20 to 25 minutes of time had passed, I heard knocking on the bathroom door and my roommate's, not Simna, voice asking me if I was done. I didn't say anything to her. I couldn't understand it myself, but as I walked down the corridor to my room, I saw Simna getting ready in her room. I went to her and was like, "What the heck, dude, you scared me." And she did not know what I was talking about. I did not know this girl very well, but she was not a prankster from what I could tell. Also, it was too early in the morning and we were too geared up about the presentation for her to do something like that, and to pretend like nothing happened. Till the end of that internship, she maintained that it wasn't her that scared me that morning. To this day, I cannot explain what or who I saw that morning. "22 years ago, I lived in a house on a lake. I rented a room from a lady that lived in the other room. I had been living with a good friend but moved out and needed a new place. My parents actually found the listing in the newspaper and set me up with it. So, aside from a strange living condition of living in a 2-bedroom bungalow with a complete stranger in the middle of nowhere, it seemed like it was actually going to be pretty nice. My new housemate had a large dog that actually kind of freaked me out a bit. However, she ended up being a super sweet dog. My housemate was never home too. Between work, her friends, and her boyfriend, I saw her like all of 3 days out of 3 months that I lived at the house. So, in the end, I practically took care of the dog. The thing about this dog, though, is that she would hide under my housemate's bed until she was hungry or needed to go outside. and never having had dogs, I didn't really know any better. The first month wasn't anything to write home about. I got some awesome photos of the moon over the lake. Somewhere in this time frame, I started recognizing the facts above. I also started getting a weird vibe in the house, I guess. In fact, if I wasn't in my room, I wanted to be in there pretty much only. I also only felt safe during the day. I use that term because the feeling at night was the same as if you think something bad is about to happen. The problem is that you just couldn't quantify it. But at some point, I started hearing knocking noises randomly in the ceiling near the kitchen. I figured that it was just birds because there's a lot around. One afternoon, though, I decided to check out the attic crawl space located above the kitchen cabinets. It was a wooden door with a single lock or latch on it, and a fixed handle. I'd eaten lunch and climbed up there to check it out, opened the door, and didn't feel threatened or anything. I peeked my head in and looked left and right over the bedrooms. Basic attic, nothing special. I closed the door and climbed down. But from that moment on, something definitely changed. The dog came out of the kitchen and just sort of stared at me, like didn't even move, not an inch. It honestly made me very uneasy. I tried the tricks of outside, treat, play, but she just didn't move. So, in the end, I just sort of went to my room and shut the door. In the weeks that followed, the events became more and more unnerving as well. I began to stop being able to sleep. I turned to leaving music on overnight. Very low volume, but it was on nevertheless. As time passed, I got to where I felt like someone was standing in the corner of my room. One evening, the alarm or clock radio in the living room, it also turned on by itself. At first, I didn't even know it was there, to be honest, because I never went in there. Nothing in there was mine. Next, over the last 2 months, it had never gone off. But I asked my housemate, when I saw her next, about that, and she denied setting it. She was also visibly confused as to why it would go off like that. But I began to feel as though I was being watched in every room. I felt as though the thing in my room was always there. I began to wake from sleep for no reason. I began grinding my teeth at night as well. I moved to sleeping with a black light on, the lowest light level that I could get in the room. Music became CDs that would repeat indefinitely, and now I would wake up, look around, and see nothing and then try to go back to sleep. My housemate and a friend were at the house one evening too, and the friend claimed to be a psychic, and she looked dead at me and asked me how I was sleeping. I hadn't seen the housemate in weeks and hadn't told her about my problems. She then tells me that there's apparently an old man in my room and that he doesn't like me. I asked if there was anything that I could do, and she said no. I began addressing this man, though, trying to fix things in a desperate attempt to get more sleep and asking him to leave me alone, but life got much worse. I would be on the phone with my now wife and would fall asleep, and she would tell me years later that there were really strange sounds that scared her. She said that she would stay on the phone to ensure that nothing happened to me. I began to have regular nightmares every time that I closed my eyes. My work started to suffer. I was exhausted. It was around this time too that I began to see a dark cloud like mist that appeared to pour out of the cinder wall, with the lights on, mind you, in the corner of the room the man had been reported standing in. I would walk over and touch the area, but there was never anything there. I would go back to bed and see it still happening. My wife was getting ready one morning, and while putting on makeup, she also said that she told me that the face just wasn't hers. She left the bathroom and she never went back in. That night, we were both asleep. She had become accustomed to my nightmares at this point. I had a dream that she and I were in my car driving down the road. It was nice. I look at her and then back at the road in time to see 3 children in the road. The next sequence happened so fast, I had no time to react. Each hit the windshield and sort of appeared zombie-like. I immediately awoke, obviously. I was sweating, shaking, and scared. My wife was instantly awake also. She asked what happened, and I relayed the story above, and her face lost colour. She looked very concerned. Thinking it was the content of the dream, I apologised, but she sat silent, long enough to make me wonder if something was wrong with me. She eventually broke the silence and said that just before you woke me, I dreamed that we had just gotten into your car. We left, and the next day I found somewhere else to stay. We moved to another state, and the first night in the new place, I slept non-stop, perfectly. I woke up rested and recognized like the silence in my head, if that makes sense. And after getting out, I'm more convinced than ever that there is something going on with that house at the lake. So I'll start off by saying that I've always been open-minded. So has my friend and her partner. We've all had our little strange or odd encounters over the years, and sometimes came up with the logical explanation or left it to the unknown, I guess. But we have never had something like this happen before. Well, the car part anyway. So, this happened a couple of hours ago. Me and my friend and her partner were downstairs about to watch a film. Their young son, 4 years old, was upstairs fast asleep. The stairs are in the front room where we were sat, and their 4-week-old daughter was in the Moses basket by the sofa. We had turned off the lights, shut the curtains, and got comfortable. There was a small bang upstairs, so my friend's partner went to check their son. All fine. But as the partner walked down the stairs, he heard almost like a wind chime jingle from their bedroom and said out loud like, "Huh, that's weird," but put it down to a possible draft somewhere or something. Not even 5 minutes later, we get comfy, go to watch the film, and me and my friend notice car lights outside, rather bright, so we take a peek. It's their car, full beams on, for about 10 to 15 seconds and then off again. And we all looked at each other dumbfounded. Then again, a bit longer this time. Then the indicators flashed a few times, then stopped. And as it stopped, their son screamed, like not even a second passed, and he started screaming and crying to the point that he was so wound up that he was nearly sick. Of course, as soon as he screamed, the dad ran straight up as my best friend was breastfeeding. The dad brought him down, and he was inconsolable. And being only 4, he couldn't exactly say much, just sort of some broken words. Then the TV went off with no warning. Then a bang upstairs, and then silence. We spoke for a good hour or so, trying to decipher what the heck just happened, but the car keys were in the other room, nowhere near any living animal or human. When we approached the car, me and my friend's partner, we checked if it was locked, and it was. We looked in the car manual and had a Google search, and nothing comes up regarding the full beams just staying on and then intermittent hazard lights going off. There was no alarm as well, which was really strange, and definitely nobody around. But since then, their son won't settle. Their little girl keeps waking randomly and crying, and they've heard a couple of more bangs. I've never experienced car lights being set on or off like that before. Usually an electrical fault would happen when the vehicle is on, or you would have a warning light, but nothing. It's a newish car as well, so quite full of tech, and to be honest, it's been checked out and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong. I have had a few experiences myself, but usually with lights in the home, candles, noises, etc., but nothing to this level. Also, the first feeling that I had was sickness and dread. I've not had gut feelings like this regarding the paranormal for many years now, but I genuinely felt unwelcome, and I dare say almost watched too.
I moved off the grid after the divorce. New Mexico fit me because it was pretty affordable. Land was cheap, the wind carried, and sun was reliable. I wanted simple living, a roof I paid for in sweat, a bank of solar panels that hummed like lifeblood, a tank full of collected rain and hauled water. Days would slip into this nice clean routine. charge the batteries, check the lines, mend what breaks, sit on the stoop and enjoy what's mine. I even had windows for growing crops. Now, I didn't come all the way out here to hide. I'd already raised kids, worked not one but 2 careers, and tried to be all the things that all people are. But out here, the list just gets shorter. Keep the lights on, keep the pump primed, and enjoy every second of it. The nights out here were better than sex. Oh, baby. 0 light pollution, and coyotes tune the countryside, and stars cut through everything else. I heard a quote that really inspired me. War is easy. All you have to do is survive. I didn't want war, but I wanted that kind of mindset when I got up every single morning. The highway brings unwanted traffic. An interstate curls through the hills a few miles south, and it'll drag strangers the way river will drag garbage. Most will pass by, some wave from the shoulder and keep moving. But every so often, one will stray. Call it curiosity, boredom, strung out desperation. They walk the Auroros and fences like they're shopping. The harmless ones will make eye contact when they ask for water. The spun out ones will come right at you. I would keep polite boundaries, a no-nonsense tone, and a camera over my porch. The nearest neighbors sat a mile apart. I also kept a single-shot 410 in the kitchen drawer and a steadier prayer inside my chest that every day nobody would be showing up to bother me and I'd have to use it. The day my story takes place, it was really quiet. I was inside cleaning dishes when someone knocked on my front door. 3 knocks, and immediately I was on edge. Nobody knocks out here. People honk or they shout from their trucks, and that's only when they show up. I have a visitor once a month, maybe, if at all. So when that sound erupted through my house, I froze for a second. Through the window, I saw a man standing on my porch. Mid-20s maybe, neat hair, clean shaven. His shirt was buttoned up to the neck, but the fabric was stained dark at the armpits and collar. Looked decent from a distance, less so up close. He gave me this polite smile. "Afternoon, ma'am. Hope I'm not intruding." "What do you need?" I asked him simply. Just kind of curious about your solar setup," he said. "I'm thinking about putting one in myself." That line would get me all the time, people wanting to see how I did it. Most of them were pretty harmless, and some turned out to actually be solar salesmen, of course. I opened the door just a few inches and left the chain on. "You running a system already?" I asked him. "Trying to. I bought property right down the road here, off the pass. I figured I'd ask around before spending a bunch of money, you know?" He looked at me dead in the eye, but something didn't really match up. His pupils were blown wide, and there was this sour smell under his cologne, ammonia or something. "What brand inverter are you using?" I asked. He blinked. Outback." "Which model?" He smiled at me like I asked him some kind of trick question. The basic one, I'm pretty sure." That's when I knew he was lying to me. Anybody who's ever touched a solar setup can't stop talking about watts and charge times. This guy was 100% guessing at all the answers, telling me what I wanted to hear. So again, the alarm bells start going off in my head. "Look, I can't really help you," I told him. "You should probably just go talk to the hardware store in town. There's a solar company too." He leaned on the doorframe. "Just 5 minutes. I'm not selling anything, I swear. I've been walking for hours." That's when I realized just how dirty he was. "From where?" I asked. "Down by the wash?" "That's 10 miles away." He shrugged at me. "I get around." I was about to shut the door when I heard something faint from the far side of the house, a scrape like a shoe brushing stucco. I felt it more than I heard it. He caught my pause. "You okay?" he asked me. "Yeah," I said. "Are you alone?" He smiled again. "Of course I am." The sound came once more, softer this time, window glass shuffling. Someone was out back. "I think you should go," I said. He tilted his head, listening into my house. "You got somebody else here?" "That's none of your business." "Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to pry." But he didn't move. He just stood there watching my face, waiting for any kind of sign. His fingers flexing at his waist. I could see the dirt under his nails, caked all black. "Look," I said. "It's getting late and I don't let strangers hang around after dark." He didn't back off. He only responded back with, "It's lonely, doesn't it?" "I'm fine with lonely." "I bet you hear weird and strange things out here." "Yeah, well, nothing I can't handle." That air between us tightened. He shifted his weight, getting ready to push. I felt it in my gut. "Back up," I said to him. "Come on, man, I'm not gonna hurt you." "Back up." His smile faltered. "Do you really think you're safe out here?" Immediately after, he lunged forward, fast and desperate. The chain caught the door halfway, snapping tight, and I slammed it shut with everything I had. His fingers were in there when it hit, crushing under the weight of the door. That sound that came out of him didn't even sound human. It was high, wet, and furious. He yanked, but I leaned my shoulder into the door. I was not letting him have his hand back. "Get off my porch!" I screamed at him. He finally pulled back, leaving streaks of blood on the wood. "Eli! Eli, come help me!" he shouted. And that name turned my stomach. There was another one. I ran through the kitchen, down the hall, and the back window, the one by my bedroom, was 2 inches open, and the screen bent inward. A man's face was hovering there, pale and pocked with sores, eyes very dilated. He was rail skinny, beard patchy, wearing a stained wife beater. He froze when he saw me, then tried to shove himself through. "Get out!" I screamed, grabbing the gun from the drawer. A short barrel 410 single shot, but it looked like a cannon up close. It was my snake gun around the property, something I usually use to get rid of the pests. I pointed it dead center at his chest. He stopped moving. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then he smiled the most hateful smile I've ever seen. "You said you were going to be easy," he muttered. "Move away from my window or I'll put a hole in your lungs." He held up his hands, half laughing. "We were just looking around. No need to get angry." I cocked the hammer, and the sound went through the house and wiped that stupid grin off that asshole's face. He stumbled backwards, tripping over something outside, then took off towards the ridge. I ran to the front and slammed that extra deadbolt, then grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Of course, it took forever for the dispatcher to answer me.
911, what's your emergency?
"There's 2 men on my property," I said. "One tried to break in. The other, he's bleeding bad. They're still out here somewhere."
Ma'am, where are you located?
I gave her my location twice, and she told me the sheriff's was sending units from town, but it'd take at least 30 minutes to get here. And out here, 30 minutes is a lifetime. It's actually the only real danger when living out here. I heard about a neighbor out in the desert having a stroke, and he died because it took the ambulance too long to get there.
Stay inside. Keep your doors locked.
The dispatcher said. Already done. I walked my house with the gun in one hand and the phone in the other, breathing like I just run some kind of marathon. I watched the windows and checked every lock twice. The sun was now gone, the light turning red across the desert. Through the kitchen window, I saw them again, both men standing at the edge of my property. The clean one was clutching his hand, holding a rag around it. The thin one had his arm around him like they were some kind of couple of stooges. They were speaking back and forth, but too far away for me to hear what they were actually saying. Then they both turned back toward the house. The clean one raised his hand and flipped me off, and the other followed suit. They stood there for a long moment, silhouettes against the dying light, then started off west toward the Badlands. Away from town or any semblance of civilization, and seeing them walk that way haunts me still to this day, because in my heart, I can't fathom where they were going or what they could have possibly been waiting for them out there. I watched until they disappeared over the ridge. I kept the lights off and the curtains open, pacing from window to window, gun in hand. The desert looked flat and harmless, but every bush now looked like it could move. Every gust felt like and sounded like footsteps just outside. The dispatcher called twice to check in, and both times she told me the same thing. Help's on the way. And both times I told her I was fine, but it still felt like the walls were closing in. I continued to sweep the house, bathroom, spare room, pantry, then checked every door a third time. The front doorknob was streaked with blood and I didn't clean it off. I wanted proof that any of this actually happened. Outside, the wind picked up and my floodlight on the pole buzzed and flickered, throwing short shadows across the porch. I raised my gun, aiming more at nothing but the darkness beyond my fence. Then, slowly, headlights came into view. 2 vehicles bumping down the dirt road, sirens off, dust halos around them. I set the gun on the table and met them at the door when they knocked. 3 deputies came inside with flashlights and checked my house, the sheds, and the perimeter. Found prints and some boot and some bare. One deputy followed a trail halfway to the Aurora, but it ended in the sand. "Well, they're gone," he said to me. "But you did the right thing. Handled that pretty damn well." I asked if they'd come back and he looked at me inside. "Probably not. But keep your gun close and keep all your doors locked." They left around midnight. I locked the door behind them and listened to the silence slowly return. The next morning, I drove into town, bought a new lock for the back door, some motion lights, and a 12 gauge with a short barrel and smooth action. I bought some more cameras too, 4 of them, wireless with night vision. That weekend, I mounted every single one, so the next time I have a visitor like that, I'll see them way before they actually knock on my door. We'd been living out of the van for 3 weeks when we found the river and the bluffs. Utah goes on forever if you know where to look. We followed a rutted 2-track past a gate that didn't lock and drifted down into a basin of red rock and cottonwoods. It was truly a beautiful, secluded stretch of desert. My girlfriend and I run an off-grid vlog, nothing fancy. A couple of cameras, a drone, tripods, mics with those fuzzy covers. We film what we use, what we eat, where we sleep, all the ways it goes wrong as well. People like the mistakes more than they actually like the wins, and we earn that pretty early on. I talk to the lens, and she shoots. We edit in the dark on a folding table with nothing but our power cell batteries. Those first few days were really perfect out there. We filmed this camp kitchen segment about cheap camp tacos, floated the river with our sandals tied through our belt loops. We hiked the bluff trail, breathless once at the top, and took a thumbnail photo of us grinning like idiots at the valley wide open behind us. At night, we lay on the tailgate and watched the satellites drift. There was this unbelievable amount of them. Coyotes yipped far off, and I slept like a baby. I thought maybe we'd stay for a week, maybe 2. There was enough flat spots to move and camp every few days, enough deadfall for small fires, 0 service, so no uploading shorts, just content creation and some light editing. We met nobody. A couple of rigs passed high on the distant ridge and then would vanish soon after. Otherwise, it was pretty much all ours. On the 3rd evening, we lugged gear into the water for a golden hour shoot. The sun slid to setting and then turned the cliff's hot bronze. She waded up to her knees, laughing and complaining, while I framed a long shot of the bend where the river hooked north. The light hit something across the canyon and flashed for just a second. "Did you see that?" she asked me. Probably a bottle or something," I said, squinting. I raised the camera, zoomed, and panned along the opposite bluff. Cottonwoods hid most of the rim. Then the sun broke through the gap and the glare hit again. A flat plate of shine. Not a bottle, but glass. There, half tucked beneath the trees, sat this black van. No movement, no sound, just kind of there, where nothing had been all week long. Watching the same view that we were, or maybe watching us. At first, we honestly didn't think much of it. People will come and go and camp in strange spots all the time. Maybe they'd come in from the other side, following some old mining road that we didn't see. But the van didn't move that night. No campfire, no music, no lantern glow, just a black box sitting in the dark across the canyon. That following morning, still there. "Creepy," she muttered, zooming in with the telephoto. "No plates, no windows either. That's really weird." "It has to be one of those converted rigs," I said. "Overlanders or something, you know?" But even as the words left my mouth, I knew I wasn't right. There was no chairs, no gear, no solar panels, just the van, and 0 evidence of any kind of recreation being had. We spent that day shooting content, filtering water, cooking beans, setting up a tarp station, and then trying to forget it all. By sundown, we'd convinced ourselves it really was nothing. But as the canyon turned purple and the stars started to burn through the haze, the air around us seemed to change and the wind stilled. It got really, really quiet. Then came the lights. They weren't like planes or satellites. They darted, stopped, dropped, and shot upward again in these impossible bursts. Sometimes they glowed red, sometimes they glowed blue. One flickered directly above the ridge, a jagged pulse that reminded us of some kind of kaleidoscope. My girlfriend filmed until her battery died, but when we checked the footage, there's nothing, just black sky. Maybe some kind of reflection? I said. Reflection of what? She asked me. It's a canyon. There's nothing out here to reflect off. No, maybe like some kind of atmospheric thing. Our lenses don't have what it takes to pick it up. And that's when we both noticed the movement across the ravine. The van's side door was now open, figures moving in and out, 3, maybe 4. They carried tripods and something that looked like a large antenna. One of them kept sweeping the lights with what looked like binoculars. Another stood on the roof of the van with something that glowed faintly green. Their setup looked far too advanced for some kind of meteor watching, way too organized. I raised my flashlight and clicked it twice, a friendly signal. Got nothing back. They didn't react. They didn't even look our way. "Hey!" I yelled across the gap, my voice echoing off the stone. The figure on the roof froze, and just for a second, they turned away, stepping down from the van. We went back inside the tent not long after, and neither of us could really sleep. The air was heavy, like right before a storm. Every time I close my eyes, I see those lights again, jerking, twitching, zigzagging across the sky like fireflies out on a wire. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a low hum. It wasn't close, but steady and mechanical. I unzipped the flap, and the van's headlights were on now, dimmed and pointed toward the sky. Those strange lights were back, more of them, scattered and moving a lot faster. My girlfriend sat up beside me, whispering, "Oh my God, they're right above us." And they were everywhere. I watched one of the men across the canyon raise up his equipment, and that hum quickly grew louder. The air felt staticky, hair rising even, and then just as suddenly everything kind of blinked out. The hum, the lights, the motion, gone. And that van went dark again. They hauled their stuff back into the van and went back to being quiet. We slept at dawn, woke late, and found it parked in the exact same spot. No visible equipment, no people, no nothing. It went on like that for 3 more nights. Every evening around 10, the sky erupted with that strange activity. Every morning, silence and emptiness. And our cameras never caught a thing. No lights, nothing but blank footage. Phones, GoPros, even the drone, all completely useless. It was as if the phenomenon wasn't happening at all, except that we were seeing it, clear as day, but only with our eyes. We started rationing the food and water early on just in case. I wanted to leave, but she said nobody's gonna believe us if we don't get some kind of proof. So we stayed. Maybe there's some kind of meteorologist, I offered, studying something rare, like ball lightning. She stared at me like I was full of shit, and maybe I was. I didn't argue. I started keeping the hatchet beside the sleeping bags, and I noticed her phone was always in her pocket now. The final night we were out there was probably the worst. The lights appeared earlier, just after sunset, flickering right above the ridge. The van's side door was wide open, silhouettes pacing in the glow of red headlamps. The hum was deeper this time, vibrating through the ground like the bass of an approaching train. I stepped out with the camera anyway. "This is night 4, I whispered, trying to keep my hand steady. The van's active again, unknown equipment, 3 subjects, maybe 4, tracking lights in the sky. Can't explain the silence out here. There's no wind, there's no animals, nothing. Behind me, my girlfriend whispered, "They're looking this way." And they were. Every single head turned toward us in this perfect unison, red lamps blinking like eyes. One of them raised something, binoculars or a scope, and a moment later, our tent lights flickered and died. The air snapped cold. The camera shut off in my hand. It was like we had been hit with some kind of EMP blast. We didn't speak again until morning, and when the sun came up, the van still hadn't moved, and there was again no sign of those people. That's when we made the decision to cross the canyon that night and see for ourselves what was going on inside that van. It took nearly 45 minutes to cross. The bluff walls were like ribs around the basin, and every sound that we made, every scrape, every breath, seemed to echo on and on. We didn't talk, we didn't really need to. All that mattered was finding out who these people were and what they were doing out here. When we finally crested the other side, the van sat about 50 yards off. Its headlights were dead, windows blacked out. Up close, it didn't look new. It was dented, rust bleeding through the paint near the door handles. There's still no sound and still no movement. We crouched behind this boulder, and my girlfriend whispered over to me, "Maybe they left?" I was about to agree, but the van's door slid open with that loud shunk. A flashlight hit us full in the face. "Stop right there," a man barked. His voice was raspy. I froze, hands instinctively going up. He stepped closer, the beam shaking in his grip. The light caught his face for just a second. Stringy mullet, missing teeth, red-rimmed eyes. Tattoos climbed up his neck like veins, faded and ugly. He held a rifle, pointed at the ground, but angled it enough that one wrong move would make it level. Hey, we're just, I started, but he cut me off. "You shouldn't be here. Turn around now." Behind him, the other figures moved, loading up equipment into the van. Tripods, long cases, coiled cables that glittered silver in the light. None of them spoke or even looked at us. "Look, we just wanted to know what you were..." He stepped to us again, jabbing the barrel in my chest. "This ain't none of your business, boy. You get back to your side before you make it fatal." My girlfriend whispered that we were leaving. The man backed up without lowering the gun. "Good, do that." He turned and shouted something to the others, words I didn't quite catch, then climbed in the driver's seat. The van roared to life, yellow cones of the headlights hitting us in the face, and for a second, the glare was completely blinding. When my vision cleared, I saw them, 3 silhouettes in the cab, all facing forward, motionless as mannequins. They reversed, spun out onto the dirt road, and drove off without a word. The hum was gone. The lights in the sky were gone too, just black emptiness above us, and the sound of the van slowly fading off into the desert. We stood there for a long time, I think too shocked to move or do anything. And when we finally made it back to camp, dawn was breaking, washing the canyon in that weak pink light. Everything felt strange, the tent, the gear, even the river now to us. We packed up in silence, loaded the truck, and left before the sun even touched the ridges. Around a week later, I went through every file, every clip. All of our footage from those nights was either black or corrupted. No lights, no van, not even our own voices. Absolutely no trace of that night exists, outside of the ones in our memories. By the time I got to college, most people had already found their people. College can be a social battleground if you don't have the right personality for it. You know the type. Kids who'd known each other since kindergarten, now magically all enrolled in that same big city university, clumping up on the quad like they were still on high school lunch break. I watched them from the edges. I was the transfer kid, 2 hours and a lifetime away from the town that I actually grew up in, dropped into a place where nobody knew my name unless it was on some kind of roster. It wasn't that bad. At least we were all adults now. It's not like I was looking over my shoulder or anything. In real life, I was just quiet, not shy exactly, just kind of late to everything. Late to the parties, late to the study groups, late to know about the inside jokes. I'd walk through this maze of a brick building and these manicured lawns and just feel completely out of place. Everybody else seemed to already know their roles, and I was trying to find my seat. I didn't even know what I wanted to major in yet. Online though, I actually existed. I had my Gameo tag, my Discord servers, my little islands of people who laughed at the same memes and stayed up way too late talking about nothing. I'd finish my night classes and go back to my shoebox dorm, then slide back into that glowing rectangle world where nobody cared that I sat alone inside the dining hall. It started off fairly simple, a couple of group chats, friends and friends of friends on Instagram, a few late night DMs that didn't feel like too big of a deal. Then somewhere at the end of my first semester, that stupid thought hit me. If I can make friends this way, then why not something more? Everybody else was meeting people, hookups, storm romances, drama. I heard it all through the paper-thin walls and half-closed doors. I was tired of listening in from the outside, so one night, lying in bed with my laptop warm up against my stomach, I downloaded that first real dating app and told myself it's not that big of a deal, just another place to exist and possibly actually be seen for once. The first week on the app was actually embarrassing. I matched with a few girls, but every connection collapsed after 5 messages, if not less. one-word replies, polite goodbyes, or just sudden silence. I kept pretending not to care, but the truth was obvious. I didn't know how to talk to people, and I couldn't keep anybody's interest. And then that's when Sabrina appeared. Her profile felt real. No heavily filtered selfies, no fake-looking glamour shots, just a girl with dark hair and a bright smile. And photos that showed actual personality. A gaming chair, controller, friends at an arcade bar. Her bio listed the same games that I actually played, watched the same shows. It felt like somebody had reached into my head and built my perfect match. I swiped right, with an instant match. I got a message almost immediately that said, "Hey," with a smiley face. I stared at that message with my heart thudding. Most of these girls never message first. She did. Yowza. And then on, she was everywhere. Quick replies, constant energy, little jokes, random questions about my classes and my dorm situation. She sent short voice clips sometimes to me, soft and cheerful, comments that did not sound rehearsed. If she was fake, she was damn good at it. We talked every single night. I lie in bed with the phone 6 inches from my face, smiling like a complete idiot at everything she typed to me. Even thinking about it now, it was in fact pure bliss. By the end of the week, she was all I thought about. Then came the line that turned my brain into static. "We should hang out," smiley face. I reread it over and over before typing out yes. "How about tomorrow, 7 p.m., the fountain on North Campus? It's quiet there." I would have met her behind a dumpster if she asked me to, but the fountain sounded perfect. So the next day kind of dragged ass. I kept checking my phone between classes to make sure the messages were actually still there. After dinner, showered, shaved, put on a clean shirt, even used cologne for the first time in God knows how long. My roommate asked if I was going to a wedding. At 6:45, I walked up that brick path toward the park and sent her a message. "Here early." She responded back saying, "Running a little late. Almost there." That's when I noticed the small detail that should have bothered me earlier. I didn't have her number. Everything that we'd said and talked about stayed within the app. Okay, maybe it didn't matter. I'll get it tonight, right? But my battery dropped from 10% to 5% in a blink of an eye. Great. How did I forget to charge my only way to contact this girl? I texted her quickly. "My phone's dying, but I'm here." "Almost there," came the response. Then my screen went black. I stood there with a dead phone in my hand, feeling like a complete idiot. People met up before smartphones existed. She knew the place, she knew the time, so I shoved my phone into my pocket and sat on the fountain bench. The water glowed blue underneath the lights, turning the closest cobblestone slick and shiny. Students passed through in 2s and 3s. A couple laughed on their way to the dorms. Every time somebody approached, I straightened up, thinking it was her. 7 came and went. Thankfully, I still had my watch to keep us both honest. I kept waiting. 7:10, nothing. 7:15, I started having thoughts. Trying not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she'd gotten stuck somewhere. Maybe she was dealing with roommate drama. Maybe she was, I didn't know. Anything but standing me up. By 7:20, I couldn't sit any longer. I stood, walked a few steps, came back, sat, stood up, and repeat. The bench now felt like a stage, like I was waiting for somebody that might be actually watching me. And that thought creeped me out. I then drifted behind a line of bushes into a small grassy area. From there, I could still see the fountain, but I didn't feel as exposed. It was pretty dark back there, and with my dark clothes and no phone, I kind of blended right in. That's when another guy walked down the path. Not Sabrina, a guy. He checked his phone, glanced around, then sat by the fountain, and a chill went through my stomach. 2 minutes later, another guy approaches from the opposite direction. Same sequence. Looking around, checks his phone, and sits down. Then a third, then a fourth. There were a lot of benches in this little area, and all of them were harboring solo dudes looking at their phones. By 7:30, 5 or 6 guys sat scattered across the fountain, all around my age, all giving off that same nervous, expectant energy that I've been drowning myself in 20 minutes earlier. I stared at them from the shadows and froze. They weren't random students, they were waiting, all waiting for the same girl, Sabrina. The thought didn't crash into me, it crawled into my head and then into my heart. I hadn't been stood up, I'd been baited. And I wasn't the only one. I watched the guys at the fountain for a moment longer before stepping out from behind the bushes. "Hey," I said aloud, "is Anybody here to meet somebody named Sabrina? All 5 turned to me. One held up his phone. Talking about her? Of course, it was the same photos, same messages, same profile. Yeah, I said. I've been here since before 7. A few of them exchanged quiet, frustrated looks, but one guy, a thick-built dude with a shaved head, walked straight up to me, already pissed. You're the one who did this? He said to me. What? No, I matched with her a week ago. Bullshit. He jabbed a finger at me. You set all this up. You were hiding in the bushes like a fucking weirdo. Before I could say anything else or respond, he shoved me, then he swung. His fist cracked up against my cheek and dropped me to the ground. My vision blurred, somebody shouted, and he hit me again. 2 guys grabbed him before he could swing once more. Knock it off! One of them yelled. He's not the catfish, dude, stop. Shaved Head kept yelling anyway, trying to break free, but the others held him back. I stayed down for a few seconds, steadying my breathing, seeing if he broke my jaw. Then one of the quieter guys pointed toward the path. Who's that? We all looked over. A 6th guy stood several yards away, partially in the shadows, hood up, phone raised, recording us. He hadn't stepped in, he hadn't reacted, he was just filming. One of them called out and asked why he was recording us. The hooded guy lowered his phone slightly, enough for us to see his face. He wasn't confused or startled. He looked absolutely entertained. What a bunch of losers, he said. Pussy-ass virgins. Then he turned around and sprinted down the walkway. One of the guys chased after him for a few steps, but stopped once he cut around a corner and disappeared off into the dark. He moved like he had already planned out his escape. Nobody spoke right away. I guess we didn't really need to. We all understood everything that was happening at the same time. Sabrina wasn't real. One by one, the guys drifted off, some annoyed, some embarrassed, all of them making that silent walk of shame. Shaved Head stomped away last, still convinced that I had something to do with it. I walked home holding my jaw. My phone powered up when I got it back on a charger in my dorm, and I opened up the app immediately. Of course, Sabrina's profile was now gone. Completely too. No photos, no chat history, no account. It was like that entire conversation had been wiped clean the moment he got what he wanted. I sat on my bed staring at the screen, replaying how he looked at us, calm, amused, almost proud of his work. He'd been standing there with us the whole time, hiding in plain sight, waiting to see how we'd react, and the truth was revealed. Sometimes I think back about the way he said that word to us, that we were losers, like we weren't people, just material. Like we were a project that he was working on. We didn't contact each other after that, just kind of walked away and cut our losses. We knew we took an L, so I guess why salt the wound even more? It was 2006, back when my entire world fit inside a very bulky Dell desktop in the corner of our living room. I spent most nights on MySpace because it was easier than trying to make friends at school. My parents had split that year. We moved across town, and I spent a lot of lunch periods texting on a flip phone just to feel like I had some semblance of a life. Emo boys were the thing at the time. Straightened hair, tight shirts, moody lyrics inside their statuses. And half the girls in my class were obsessed with boys online. I guess I wasn't really any different though. I met him in a MySpace chat room one night. Danny XXRarXX. Yeah. His profile picture was a skinny kid with long black bangs, pale skin, and a lip ring. Bathroom mirror pic. You know the type. Band poster taped crooked behind him. Exactly the kind of guy that everybody at school was daydreaming about. He actually messaged me first. You seem chill. You from around here? I remember how fast my fingers moved, how relieved I felt when anybody wanted to actually talk to me. And within the hour, I knew his favorite bands, his favorite soda, the name of the girl who broke his heart. He said he was 15, went to a high school a few miles away. And the wild part was that when a couple of girls at my school claimed they'd seen him around at games or something, or hanging out near parking lots. A real local kid, somebody my age, somebody into me. Pretty soon, I'm logging in just for him, and it became the only part of my day that I actually looked forward to. Every message felt like proof that maybe I was not, in fact, invisible. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought I was. And for about a month, Danny and I were basically glued to each other online. Before school, after school, late at night, constant messaging. He always said the right things. He told me I was different, that he felt like he could talk to me about anything and everything. And at 13, with that kind of attention, it hit hard and I did not want it to stop. So naturally, I wanted to meet him. At first, I asked and he said yes without any hesitation. Totally, let's hang out. And then canceled the morning of. The next attempt, he got grounded. Another time, his phone broke. It became this pattern. Agree, cancel, and every time he apologized, I believed it. I was too invested to consider anything else. By week 5, I was done waiting. I pushed harder, telling him I didn't care if he didn't look exactly like his photos. I just wanted to see him in person. Okay, let's meet behind Dario's Pizza, 5 p.m. It wasn't a great spot, but it was close enough for me to walk to. Told my mom that I was heading to a friend's place, grabbed my small purse and headed out the door. My stomach was in knots that entire walk, equal parts excitement and dread as well. I kept looking at every passing car, half expecting somebody to roll a window down and call my name. I reached the alley a few minutes early. It looked very dismal, tight, dark, sour smelling from the dumpsters. I stood under the security light and texted him, "I'm here." No response. So I waited 5 minutes, then 10, and I called his phone and it went straight to voicemail. I paced back and forth, checking both ends of the alley, telling myself he was probably sneaking out or stalling for some kind of dramatic entrance. And then I heard a vibration. Not my phone, but another one. The buzzing came from around the corner where the alley hooked behind the next building. I frowned and took out my phone and called his number again. The buzzing repeated, same rhythm, same timing, and a cold rush then hit my chest. I followed the sound slowly at first, then faster as the certainty grew in my stomach. I turned the corner and froze. A boy stood there, slouched up against a brick wall. Not Danny, not even close. He was pudgy, maybe a year or two older than me, with long greasy hair that covered half his face. He wore these faded black jeans and a hoodie that was riddled with safety pins. He held a phone in his hand. The screen lit up with an incoming call. Aubrey, my calls. He looked at me like he'd been caught doing something. "Hey," he said. His voice was low, really shy. "It's me, Danny." I shook my head. No, you're not him." Pushed his hair behind his ear like that might help the situation. I didn't get ready today, okay? I know I look different." "You're not the same person at all," I said. "That's not you." He took a small step toward me. "It is me, I swear. I used to be thinner." I backed away, straight into somebody standing behind me. I gasped and spun around, but the second boy was already on top of me. Same clothes, same build, same filthy hair, older though, taller. He grabbed my waist and pulled me into him. "Oh," he said, laughing softly. "She's tiny." I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. The first boy moved in front of me, blocking the view of the alley. They didn't look threatening in the movie villain sense, but they looked like kids who spent too much time online. But the way they crowded me left me no doubt. They knew exactly what they were doing. I felt them squeeze my chest and then my hips. "Relax," the first one said. "You said you wanted to hang out." "No," I said louder. "Let me go." "You talk big." The second boy breathed in my hair. "Don't pretend you didn't." I shoved the first one, but he grabbed my wrist. His hand was sweaty, shaky, like he was nervous and excited at the same time. "Don't freak out," he said. "We're being cool. We just want to move." I snapped and tried to wriggle free. He didn't. The second boy pressed closer, his hands moving up my sides. "Please stop," I said. My voice cracked. "That's not fair," the first boy said. "You said stuff. You can't just..." And that was it. Something in my brain flipped from scared to just done. I jerked my arm backward, ripping it from his hand, and slammed my shoulder into his chest. He stumbled, lost his balance, and the second boy lunged out to grab me, but only snagged my hoodie by the sleeve. The seam tore as I twisted, forcing myself out into the open stretch of that alley. They shouted behind me, overlapping each other, yelling at me to wait. "Come back, you promised." I didn't look back. I ran full sprint down the alley, toward the yellow glow of the pizza place's sign, towards people, noise, anything but them. I heard their footsteps pounding after me, heavy and uncoordinated, but determined. They weren't giving up. "Please," one of them yelled. "Just talk to us." "Nobody's mad," the other one shouted. I ran even faster. I could feel them losing ground, wheezing, stumbling, but still chasing me, still calling out my name. Then my online user handle. I burst out of the alley into the crowded front of Dario's. The smell of pizza and fryer oil hit me immediately, making me sick, but I didn't slow down. I shoved through the door, almost tripping as I reached the counter. A couple eating near the window stared at me like I was causing a scene, but I didn't care. I pulled out my flip phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. When dispatch picked up, my words came out all at once. "There's two guys, they grabbed me, they tried to corner me, they're still out there." Dispatch asked where I was and I told her. She told me to stay inside, that officers were on the way. Her voice was calm and steady, and for the first time since stepping into that alley, I felt like I was actually safe. I kept glancing at the windows, kept expecting to see one of the boys pressed up against the glass, scanning the restaurant for me. That thought made my chest tighten like I was having an asthma attack. I backed myself into a booth but stayed standing, ready to bolt at any moment. A worker asked if I needed water and I nodded at him without speaking. It felt like forever, but I think 10 minutes later the cops finally show up. Two officers come inside to talk to me, while another went around the back. I gave them everything I had, what the boys looked like, what they said, where I'd been standing when they grabbed me. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, no matter how hard I tried to steady them. A radio crackled on one of the officers' shoulder, and a voice said,
"We've got them. Far into the alley, both matching the description, trying to avoid us."
I don't know what that felt like in the moment. Relief, I guess, but also this strange numbness, like my brain had flipped a switch to tone down my anxiety. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges, and I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said, "absolutely." They took my mom's number next, and that was the part I dreaded the most. What she'd say when she found out I'd been sneaking around to meet boys from the internet. But when she arrived, she didn't yell, just wrapped her arms around me and asked if I was okay, if I was hurt. The officers brought me back out so I could identify the boys. I stayed behind the patrol car door, but I could see them clearly, both red-faced, sweating and out of breath. The greasy hair, the safety pin hoodie, the older one rubbing his hands together nervously. They wouldn't look at me, but kept glancing at each other, confused and irritated, like they couldn't understand why I reacted the way I did. Seeing them like that, pathetic and cornered, should have made me feel better, but it didn't. This really all happened to me. The police walked them to the cruiser, hands cupped behind their backs, one mumbling something under his breath, maybe an apology or some kind of excuse. I didn't care. I kept my eyes on the pavement. After that night, I deleted my MySpace, deleted AIM, stopped signing into any kind of chat rooms, ever. I didn't trust screens anymore, not when I knew firsthand how easily somebody could slide through them, pretending to be who they thought you wanted them to be. It's strange thinking back on it now. I was 13, I thought I was talking to my dream boy, but I was really talking to a stranger with greasy hair and a stolen photo, waiting for the right moment to lure me into a dark place. People always say the internet was simpler back then, but it wasn't. Not for me.
I'm a 20-year-old woman, and this event occurred 4 years ago, when I was around 16. It was during the summer between my sophomore and junior years of high school. I've encountered several unsettling situations living in West Virginia, but this remains one of the most disturbing. I'll recount the events as accurately as I can. This happened in Cherry River, just before it flows into Nicholas County. My friend and I drove separately and met at a pull-off along the main road to do some fishing. Next to the pull-off was a place called State Road Garage. It was enclosed by a fence that required a key for entry. At the time, I didn't know its purpose, but later research revealed that it belongs to the West Virginia Department of Transportation. To the left of the building is a short trail that led down to the river. That evening, the garage appeared to be deserted, with no cars or workers in sight. The only vehicle we noticed was a weathered pickup truck, possibly an old Silverado, with a camper shell on the back. I can vividly recall the 3 deadbolt locks securing the camper shell to the frame, and 2 very unsettling individuals sitting in the front. The truck was parked far into the trail's entrance, on rough terrain, while we parked by the main road. We didn't want to risk getting stuck. This immediately put me on edge, as I have been watching true crime and scary stories on YouTube since I was 11. This scene felt like the opening of a horror story. From what I recall, the truck's occupants were a disheveled blonde woman who appeared worn down and possibly missing teeth, and a greasy, long-haired man in a wife beater. Crackheads are never able to hide their addiction that well. As we passed their truck on the way to the river, they locked eyes with us, staring intently. My friend seemed less concerned than I was. I tend to be a bit paranoid naturally. Strange characters are common to our area. Most of them are harmless, but I never let my guard down. My friend mentioned that she should call her boyfriend, who lived 20 minutes away, if anything happened, though I wasn't sure how that would help in the moment. We began fishing, and my friend caught a rock bass. Not long after, we heard footsteps and looked up to see the woman from the truck approaching the riverbank. She looked rough. She may have been an attractive woman once upon a time, but the prolonged drug use had taken its toll. Her teeth were severely damaged, giving her jaw that sunken appearance, and her skin resembled a crumpled up paper bag. She was holding a red Kodak camera. When she got to the riverbank, she asked, "Can you tell me your first and last name and ages?" She then told us that she was taking photos for a newspaper. My alarm bells were going off big time. My friend and I had made plenty of poor decisions in our teens, but I was always weary of strangers, especially in this context. But I panicked and gave my first name, but lied about my age, subtracting just 1 year. A pointless fib that wouldn't have mattered if our details were being collected. I didn't give my last name, and I can't recall what my friend said. The woman then asked, "Can I take your picture?" Despite my unease, I was a people pleaser and reluctantly agreed. She snapped our photo and started back toward her truck, tripping on the rocks as she went. My friend and I stifled giggles at the odd encounter. A short time later, my friend's fishing line broke, and we headed back to our cars. To my frustration, halfway back she told me that she had forgotten her tackle box by the river. Every instinct screamed not to go back, but I knew it wasn't a good idea for her to go back alone, so I reluctantly followed her back down to the riverbank. On our way back, we encountered the man from the truck. He reeked like he had been bathing in a shit bath. "Have y'all seen my girlfriend?" His question was odd. They had been together in the truck before the woman approached us. This felt like a setup, straight out of a human trafficking scenario. Alarmed, we told him, "Yeah, she went that way," pointing in the opposite direction of our fishing spot. He nodded and wandered off. I urged my friend to leave, baffled by her insistence that everything was fine. I was on high alert, half expecting the couple to charge at us with weapons. I scanned the area, noting that the rocks along the river could be used as potential defense and planning escape routes. The silence that set in was eerie. Maybe they left, or maybe they were waiting. About 10 minutes later, a blood-chilling scream echoed from upriver. It sounded like the woman from the truck. Terrified, we bolted into the forest, away from the river, and through the dense thicket. There was no trail, just a patch of trees parallel to the main path. The scream seemed to come from near the trail's entrance, so we couldn't risk heading that way. We came out of the tree line along the main road, downstream from our cars, and we sprinted to them. We tossed our tangled up fishing gear inside and locked our doors. As we caught our breath, we see the couple rushing back to their truck. I was honestly surprised to see that the woman was still alive. They glared at us before hopping into their truck and speeding off. My friend and I sat there and tried to process the whole ordeal, watching the road in shock. Minutes later, the old Silverado flew past us again, heading in the opposite direction. The woman was leaning out of the passenger window with her camera, and she snapped another picture of us. My friend pulled out behind them and so did I, and we followed her. My friend recorded herself reciting the license plate number to remember it. The truck veered into back roads and eventually lost us. We drove to my grandmother's house nearby and told her everything. She agreed that we should call the police. An officer eventually came and took our statements, but I worried he didn't take us seriously. He said he would run the license plate, but we never heard back. I've always wondered who those people were and what they had planned. Somewhere, there may be some photos of my friend and I, awkwardly holding our fishing poles, possibly labeled with our names and ages, pinned to a corkboard in a dark room. It was about a year after this happened that the Donald Ray Lands and the Jean K. Whitefeather case became headline news around here. They were a couple who adopted 5 black children from a Minnesota shelter and forced them into labor as slaves on their property. The couple that we encountered were not them, but it does make me wonder what could have happened to us that day. The woman screaming could have been a ruse to get us somewhere so they could force us into the back of that Silverado. Our parents might have never known our fate, which still bothers me to think about. I've searched local news websites and online articles, but I found nothing about the couple we encountered that day. I still go fishing often, but I've never returned to that spot. A few years ago, during what was likely the darkest chapter of my life, I worked overnight shifts at a Walmart supercenter in rural West Virginia, 6 nights a week, from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. I stocked everything from fishing lures to makeup. It was soul-crushing work, a fluorescent lit void where apathy died. Let's be real, Walmart already has a creepy undercurrent to it, but this 24-hour outpost amplified it. In the dead of night, it drew a parade of locals, meth heads and opioid zombies, wandering the aisles, scavenging for forgotten deals. No security guards patrolled, and I would later learn that most of the cameras, especially those in the parking lot, had been glitchy for months, if not years. As one of the few young women who worked on the overnight crew, I attracted plenty of unwanted attention. But the standout was this guy who materialized every time I stepped out for a smoke break, no matter the hour, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. He would round the corner within seconds, launching into chatter like we had planned it or something. It really didn't matter which of the entrances I used. He was always there. At first, I figured that he was an employee who else would be hanging around a dingy box store in the witching hours. Most of us smoked during our 2 15-minute breaks, so the coincidence seemed plausible. But this wasn't the case. He didn't work there. He would just mimic the overnight uniform by wearing dark blue t-shirts. I quit going out alone, sticking to breaks with guy friends from the crew, including one that I had known since middle school. But even that didn't faze him, and it turned into an inside joke across the store. I was unsettled but not panicked until my stalker ramped things up. He'd grill me about my relationship status and would ask me about it every chance he got. I was deep into GTA 5 then, so I spun a yarn about my terrifying long-distance boyfriend Trevor from Northern California. Hey, it fit the vibe. But he just shrugged it off. Eventually I dropped the niceties and started ghosting him mid-sentence. One night my go-to guy friend had called out sick, and the others were tied up across the store. I headed out with 2 older women from my crew. They finished quickly and went inside. I lingered for a final drag, and just as I turned to follow, he popped up. Looking back, it wouldn't be crazy to assume that he was in a car, scoping out the entrances with a pair of binoculars. He grabbed my hand, not a vice grip, but firm enough. "Come to my car real quick. I want to show you something." I'm not hot-tempered by nature, but my rage boiled over. I yanked free and bolted inside, my heart pounding in my chest. I stormed to the head manager and spilled it all. It turns out my stalker had a cousin on the unloading crew in the back, which was his excuse for loitering. The cousin was mortified, swearing that he'd handle it. But management? Fucking useless. No warning, no banishment, just shrugs and says, Not our problem. I quit soon after, not over the stalking directly, more so the brass's incompetence. A friend of mine later clued me in. The guy kept lurking around nightly, shifting his creep routine to another woman. He hounded folks for weeks after I left, desperate for my name and address. Then one day, he disappeared. To this day, I still fixate on those busted out parking lot cameras and wonder if on one of those endless, exhausting nights, would anyone have noticed if I had just vanished? I'm 32 now, and this happened over a decade ago, but it still keeps me awake at night. It was late 2011. I was fresh out of high school, scraping by as a busboy at a small diner in Washington, D.C., before college kicked in that January. My buddy Alex, who I've been tight with since middle school, and myself decided to shake off the city grind with a weekend getaway. Some friends of ours had rented a cabin in the backwoods of West Virginia, tucked in the hollers near Summersville Lake, about a 3-hour drive from the Beltway. It was supposed to be bonfires, brews, and fishing. Sounded like a good time. We piled into my 1990 Honda Accord. It looked like a piece of shit, but it ran perfectly. It had a collection of CDs I'd spin on long drives. I was really into Dark Throne back then. The drive started easy, the Beltway crawl into I-66, then west through the Shenandoah haze. But as the sun began to set around 6 p.m., we missed a turn at a sketchy, unmarked fork and ended up going down the wrong way. Yes, we made a wrong turn in West Virginia. The irony is not lost on me. The GPS was no help. I figured we were in some kind of dead zone. Neither of our phones were cooperating either. Screw it. Let's just see what's at the end of the road, Alex said. As we snaked deeper into the forest, the pavement gave way to gravel that crunched like teeth under our tires. The sky darkened, and the headlights became the only sources of light. There were no streetlights, no houses, just endless pine trees bordering the road. Then, the road pinched into a single lane, flanked by a barbed wire fence. A faded signpost was lit up by the beams. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Slow down. This might be it. I hope you're right. Having a double-barrel shotgun go up my ass is not on the bucket list. We rounded the bend and came to a clearing. There was a faint porch lamp on a rundown cabin that looked like it had been gnawed by termites. Clothesline stretched between crooked poles. One of the lines appeared to have several carcasses dangling from it. At first, I thought it was a hunter's haul, but as we crept closer, the beams swept over the hanging bodies, and my breath caught in my throat. I'll admit that I'm not used to seeing skinned and gutted deer torsos, but there was something about the body at the end of the line that broke me. It seemed different from the others, human-like, or at least it used to be, before someone hacked off the arms and opened up the chest. I knew this was completely fucked when I felt bile rising in my throat. I had to look away and regain my senses. I don't recall seeing a head, by the way. Holy shit, is that a person? Alex whispered. I didn't say a word. I quickly put the car into reverse and slammed down on the gas pedal, backing away from the clotheslines. I had to make a 3-point turn to get out of there, because there was no way I was going back down that narrow dirt road in reverse. However, in my panic, I didn't pay attention, and the back of my car crashed into a couple of drum barrels. Shit! What was that? I don't care. We're getting out of here. When I put the car back into drive and sped toward the dirt road, I swear I saw a figure standing next to a shed about 15 yards away from us. I only saw it for a brief second, because we were hauling ass out of there. Alex was so freaked out, he started babbling nonsense, while I white-knuckled the wheel, my vision tunneling. Whoever was standing next to the shed didn't chase us. I was expecting an arrow in the tires, with the headlights of a pickup truck closing in behind us. If we actually saw a dismembered body hanging from a line, I doubt whoever did that would want us talking to the police. We barreled back the way we came from and made our way out to the highway. As soon as a bar signal flickered on my phone, we pulled over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. After I relayed what happened, a police cruiser slowly rolled up behind us a short time later. If you were passing by on the highway, you would have thought we had been pulled over. We explained everything. I remember being embarrassed about my voice cracking. They listened to our story with blank faces, then exchanged a skeptical look. The older officer spoke up. "Sounds like you boys stumbled onto Old Man Hargrove's spread. He's a hunter, been at it for 40 years. And that body was probably a gutted buck. There's been no reports of missing folk around here. I know about it. The shadows play tricks in the hollers, or maybe y'all just been hitting the sauce." I insisted that the disemboweled body I saw looked human, but the officers laughed it off. "Look, y'all just got a bit turned around is all. Stay on Route 19 next time." He then gave us a patronizing warning about trespassing fines and told us to be safe. We drove the rest of the way in silence. There were no follow-ups. On the flip side, we ended up having a great time at the cabin, and even used our experience to entertain the rest of the group when it came time to sit around the fire and tell ghost stories. Despite what you may have heard about West Virginia, it really is a scenic sanctuary. Looking back all these years later, I stand by what I saw, and so does Alex. I've seen more pictures of hanging animal remains than I care to admit, and I'm telling you, we saw the body of someone who met a gruesome fate. I don't know who it was, but what we saw that night was the conclusion to one of the many missing person cases in rural West Virginia. When I was around 17, the year was 2017. Urbex had become pretty popular on YouTube, and living in a small town in Minnesota, there was no shortage of abandoned places to explore if you knew where to look, so I decided to hop on the trend. There was a 3-story mansion just outside of Asante, about 50 miles north of Minneapolis, that had been abandoned for around 20 years. The mansion itself was literally in the middle of nowhere. There were several rumors about what happened at that place, from an entire family being murdered by an escaped psychopath to some kind of deformed man living there. The true story is much less exciting. The owner was in major debt, went broke, and his house was eventually repossessed by the bank. They tried to turn it into a rental property, but a severe mold infestation prevented that. Ever since, it just sat, empty, and rotting away. I talked to my group of friends about exploring the place for a possible YouTube video. We would make a quick walkthrough with just me and another friend, David, to check things out before bringing the entire gang along with the camera gear. One Saturday night, around 11 p.m., David and I parked on a back road about a quarter mile away from the destination. We really didn't want to get caught. The police around here are pretty bored most of the time, and would have jumped at the chance to arrest a couple of teenagers for trespassing. The house sat on a 3-acre property, mostly surrounded by forest. We hiked through the trees, making sure we kept our flashlight use to a minimum, until we came upon the old house. Our original plan was to go through the back door, but it was locked, so we decided to go around to the front of the house and try our luck there. We entered a porch area that appeared to have been screened in at some point, but was now just metal frames with shreds of mesh hanging from them. There was also an assortment of old furniture, lawn chairs, and wooden crates. After looking around for a bit and snapping some photos, we approached a pair of double doors, only to see that they were chained shut. Most of the windows we saw were either boarded up or completely smashed out. We wanted to avoid entering through a broken window if we could, but it looked like we would have no choice. So we found an opening on the ground level on the other side of the house. As we approached, I got this strange feeling like something terrible was about to happen. I knew the rumors of what took place here were just made-up stories, but standing outside the dark, abandoned mansion in the dead of night was enough to make even a skeptic like me second-guess himself. And just because those stories never happened didn't mean nothing ever bad happened here. I'll admit that my apprehension did involve some concern about spooky ghosts. I grabbed David's shoulder and stopped him from going any further. "What's the problem?" "I thought I heard something. Just listen." In truth, I hadn't heard anything. I just wanted him to stop walking so we could both listen before entering the old house. We were approaching the open window from an angle, so we couldn't see directly into it. But it's a good thing we stopped when we did, because what we heard next was far scarier than what I had initially been concerned about. The pump of a shotgun is a sound that immediately grabs your attention, and that's exactly what we heard coming from the open window. As soon as we heard it, David and I hauled ass in the opposite direction, running back toward the front porch and making our way around the other side of the house, the way we had come from. As soon as we made it back to the tree line, we heard a gunshot coming from the mansion. I'm not 100% sure if someone was firing at us, because the blast did sound like it came from somewhere inside the mansion, but we weren't sticking around to find out. We backtracked to the car and got the hell out of there. Needless to say, we never ended up filming an Urbex video there. I'm not sure what was taking place inside that old mansion the night we went there, but someone was inside that house with a loaded shotgun. It could have been just some vandal putting in some target practice, but something tells me they were waiting for us to come within the direct line of sight of that open window. Shotgun aimed. I don't know that for sure. They could have just stayed quiet and we would have kept going toward the window. But for whatever reason, they decided to pump their shotgun, alerting us to their presence. I suppose if they really wanted us dead, I wouldn't be here now, telling this story. This event effectively ended my Urbex aspirations. We never returned to Shotgun Manor. But as far as I'm aware, it still sits there to this day, silent, but empty. I couldn't tell you. This happened in March of this year. My friends and I decided to go to this abandoned campsite located in the eastern Oklahoma countryside. I had been there the year before. The property was supposedly haunted. This is not a paranormal story. I'm just telling you the reason that we wanted to check it out. There were 5 of us all together: Tyler, Jordan, Abigail, Angela, and myself. We decided to enhance the experience by bringing alcohol and weed. We had 2 bottles of Henry and 9 pre-rolled joints. We arrived around 11:30, so it was dark by then. We brought along flashlights and gloves, so we were ready to go exploring. But about 15 minutes in, Angela and Abigail both wanted to go back because they were complaining about it being boring. But the rest of us had put too much into planning this trip, so we had to convince them to keep going. This required opening up one of the bottles of Henry. I personally don't like the taste of alcohol, but I decided that I would be doing some drinking that night. I also fired up a joint. One thing about me, though, is that when I'm drunk and high at the same time, I tend to get very paranoid. It obviously didn't help that we were 2 miles deep into the woods. Yeah, I wasn't making the best choices that night. After a while, the paranoia began to kick in. I started hearing footsteps disturbing the leaves behind us. I was convinced enough to yell out, "Hey, is anyone there?" Again, this probably wasn't the best idea, because it freaked out Abigail and Angela. Tyler even asked me, Dude, what are you going on about? Look, I know I'm kind of fucked up right now, but I'm hearing someone following us. It's probably just an animal, dumbass. How stoned are you? We kept going, but I continued to hear what I thought were footsteps behind us. The thought of it being an animal didn't make me feel any better. I've never seen a black bear in the wild, but I was pretty sure they were native to this area of Oklahoma. We got to the campsite soon after. We sat at a wooden table to rest after walking 5 miles in the dark. It was around 2:50 a.m. at this point, and we decided to start partying. Let's stop here for a moment and take stock of the situation. A bunch of young adults smoking and drinking in the dead of night on a deserted campground in the middle of the vast Oklahoma forest. There were several rumors as to why this place had shut down. Some say that one of the camp counselors lost his mind and murdered several children with a fire axe. Of course, there is no evidence that this actually ever happened. My guess is this place shut down because of financial reasons. It was now just a collection of abandoned cabins and a rec hall with a caved-in roof. We were definitely being loud as hell. When I drink, the alcohol runs right through me, so I have to relieve myself multiple times. I told the gang that I had to piss and went to go find a tree. I decided to walk further away from the group until they were out of sight. I wanted to avoid any pranks they would pull on me while I was doing my business. When I was midstream, I heard a twig snap about 15 feet behind me. I didn't think it was one of my friends, since the noise was in the opposite direction they were in. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and nearly shat my pants at what I saw. Standing about 15 feet away, I saw 4 hooded figures among the trees. I zipped up my damn pants before my stream was even finished and started running back toward the group. Guys, we need to leave here now. We aren't alone out here. They must have thought I was pranking them until they saw that I was running. They all got up and started sprinting. I heard more footsteps behind us and all around us. I genuinely thought that I was about to die. We were so deep in the woods that no one would hear us scream if we were slaughtered. None of us were thinking straight because of the recreational influence. Angela fell, and I guess no one else noticed except for me. I quickly turned to help her. Once I got her back on her feet, we couldn't tell where the rest of the group went. The moonlight was barely helping, and I didn't want to turn on my flashlight and give away our position. Angela was a mess at this point, crying and freaking out, so I had to try to calm her down and keep moving, even though I felt like I was having a panic attack myself. We kept going until we saw what looked like an old shed. I devised a plan to use the shed as cover while I called the others on my phone. Once we made our way inside, we stopped hearing the footsteps, so I thought we had lost them. The shed was actually a cabin with 3 rooms and a hallway. Once we got to the entrance, we were bombarded by a putrid smell. It damn near made me throw up all the Henry I had earlier. Angela, however, couldn't hold back and vomited right away. I tried calling Tyler and Jordan, but it just went straight to voicemail. I didn't have Abigail's number, and Angela couldn't help since her phone was dead. The smell was becoming unbearable, and I had a feeling I knew what it was. I left the entrance and made my way further inside. There was nothing of interest in the first 2 rooms, but the third I arrived at was where the stench was coming from. My heart was in my throat as I opened the door. I shined my light inside and was met with the most disturbing thing I think I've ever seen in my life. I know that a lot of you aren't going to believe me, but I'm going to tell you what I saw. At first, I was stunned when I saw a face on the floor staring up at me. It was only when I panned to my light that I realized that the head wasn't connected to anything. Leaning up against the wall were 2 torsos. there is something else that was there that I just can't bring myself to tell you. I like to think that I just imagined it, but I know it was there. I had to stay sharp if we were going to escape. I looked at the maps on my phone and saw that we were still 2 miles away from any roads. Angela was still bawling her eyes out, crying about how she didn't want to die. Honestly, I thought it was likely that we would end up dying that night. We heard the footsteps racing toward the cabin outside. I grabbed Angela and told her, "If you don't want to die, we have to run. And don't look back." I planned on running in the opposite direction of the road, while Angela made for the road. I would hide somewhere until whoever was following us passed us. Then I would eventually come out and head for the road. I took off, yelling to get their attention. I should mention that I'm in pretty good shape, since I used to play sports in school, so I was capable of running long distances. Once I was far enough away, I got down low to the ground behind a tree and covered up with leaves and branches to camouflage myself. I was already wearing dark clothing, so I felt this was my best chance. My biggest fear came true when I could feel something crawling down my leg. I've had arachnophobia since I was little, and I've been bitten by spiders before. If not for the adrenaline, I definitely would have freaked out and given away my hiding spot. After what felt like hours, but was probably more like 2 minutes, I could hear the footsteps running away from where I was. I still wanted to play it safe, and stayed down there for another 15 minutes before I thought it was safe enough to make a break for it. Soon I was back on my feet, heading in the direction the road was in. It was now 2:17 a.m. I tried my mom and dad's cell. Neither of them picked up. So I called the house phone. Yes, we still have those. After 2 rings, my dad picked up, and he sounded pissed. I immediately told him the circumstances and about the bodies I found, and that I was separated from all my friends. While I was on the phone with him, Jordan finally noticed that I had tried to call him. So I hung up with my dad and answered Jordan's call. "Dude, where the hell are you?" "Angela and I got separated from you guys. I told her to run toward the road, while I distracted whoever was chasing us. See if you can find her there. I'm heading that way right now, so I'll be there soon." "Okay, man. Watch your ass." I ended up getting there before the rest of the group. Angela came out from her hiding place. She told me that she thought I was a goner for sure. I sent Jordan our location, and they showed up about 5 minutes later. We were all relieved to see that everyone was okay. Angela and Jordan hugged each other for about 2 minutes straight. "Hey guys, that's lovely and everything, but we really should get out of here." Once we were back in the car, I told them about what I saw in the cabin. They asked me why I hadn't called the cops yet. I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with being chased through the fucking woods." I called up the police and gave them an approximate location of where I found the bodies, but I never heard back from them. I guess whoever was out there must have hidden or destroyed the evidence. I still have reoccurring nightmares about what I saw in those woods. I grew up in Oklahoma. This happened when I was about 10, and my brother was 12. We were playing out in our front yard one afternoon when our neighbor called us over. He lived one house away, and we hadn't interacted with him before. Maybe just saying hello if we passed by when he happened to be outside. I've always been a really shy kid, so I stayed back while my brother went up and asked what he wanted. He explained that he was planning on going out of town within the next few days, and he wanted us to take care of his pool while he was gone. He said that summers were too hot for kids not to be swimming. My brother agreed, and we were told to come over in 2 days. On top of being shy, I was also very paranoid, and I had this weird feeling about our neighbor. This proposal came out of nowhere. I told my brother, "You can go if you want, but count me out." I guess my mom saw us talking to him and came outside and asked what he wanted. We explained his story. No, you two aren't going over there by yourselves. We don't even know that man." 2 days later, we still see his car in the driveway and lights on inside. Something about him bothered me. I told my parents that he never left for his vacation, so he must have been lying to us for some reason. They just sort of dismissed me and said that he probably just canceled his plans. Over the summer, I kept noticing him mowing the lawn 2 or 3 times a week. He never wore a shirt. He just went up and down his yard for hours. Once again, I would tell my parents how weird I thought he was, but they just kept brushing me off. A few more months went by, and school was back in session by now. I noticed him sitting outside his front porch every day the school bus drove by, and he would just watch us all get off, with this blank, unmoving expression. When someone is staring daggers at you like that, it makes you feel uncomfortable. Eventually, my parents decided to install a pool of our own. We had been asking for one for several years. They had to remove a large portion of our fence to get equipment into our backyard. It was one of those above-ground pools you had to anchor, but the ground here can be very rocky, and it took much longer to dig than expected. With the fence gone, our weird neighbor could now see directly into our backyard. I sometimes saw him watching from one of his windows. By the time the pool was completed, it was warm enough to go swimming. I headed outside in my swimsuit, with my clothes over the top. I immediately saw our neighbor staring at me, and decided to swim with my clothes on instead. Over time, I picked up on something. My neighbor wouldn't watch my brother and his friends, only me. The fence was eventually rebuilt, which I was glad. One day I was happily swimming in our backyard when my dad comes up to me. "Hey son, I need to talk to you for a second." I get out and I sit with him. "Son, I have to say that I'm sorry. Your mom and I get really busy, and sometimes we just forget to listen, and that's not right." I'm glad you trusted your instincts. It turns out our neighbor was a very bad man. He didn't go into too much detail since I was still young, but on the school bus, some of the kids were talking. Our creepy neighbor had invited another girl from down the street to come swim in his pool. He brought her inside his house and started taking photos of her in her swimsuit, and then let her outside and told her that she needed sunscreen and would apply it for her. You get the idea. The girl's older sister came looking for her. She knew that her sister had gone inside, but he slammed the door in her face, so she ran home to tell her parents. The police were called, and he was arrested. His computer was filled with photos of children from around the area. Pictures of me could have been on it. They also found an alarming amount of CP. What still bothers me to this day is that his wife stayed by his side. Mind you, they had children who were toddlers at the time. He was convicted, but has since been released and is now back with his family. We eventually moved away for a different reason, but I can't imagine ever having to look at that man ever again. This story happened in the summer of 2011. For some background, I live in Midwest Oklahoma. My girlfriend Angela and I were renting a 4-bedroom house at the time. We were home one night chilling on the couch. At some point we both fell asleep, and I began dreaming. We were walking around our neighborhood when we saw a man trying to break into a car. He was hitting the car window with a hammer. The noise was very loud, and he wasn't trying to be discreet. I wanted to intervene, but my girlfriend held me back and then whispered into my ear, "Someone is outside our door. You need to wake up." I suddenly woke up and heard a loud noise, just like the one in my dream. My heart was pounding. I looked out the window that overlooked the front doorstep, and I saw a figure holding what looked like a hammer. I panicked and woke up my girlfriend. When she saw what was going on, she screamed. The intruder turned his attention to the window and managed to break it. Luckily for me, I always had my gun locked and loaded. The intruder was about to make his way inside when I confronted him, aiming the gun directly at his head. I shouted at the man, "You make one more move, and they'll be scraping your brains off my porch." I didn't say those exact words because I was absolutely scared out of my mind, but I did convey that I would end his life if he tried coming inside. The figure backed away with his hands up, then ran off into the darkness. I called the police right after and filed a report. We never heard anything back from them, of course. I couldn't give an accurate description, and the man took his hammer with him. He also didn't cut himself when he smashed the window, so we'll give him credit for being properly dressed for the occasion. But I'm glad I woke up in time. It's amazing how a simple dream can save your life. This story happened to my mom's friend. From here on out, I'm just going to call him Uncle. He has given me permission to share this story. This took place in the winter of 2013 in China, during the Chinese New Year. He was driving from work back to his hometown, which was in another province. It was in the middle of the night. The highway was completely empty since everyone was enjoying their celebrations rather than being out on the road. Uncle was extremely tired from work and had to drive for 10 hours on that cold winter night. He was pretty stressed out, as you can imagine. The drive was rough until he discovered a side mountain route that would save him some time, so he took it, which was a huge mistake. For those who have ever traveled to China, you know how dangerous some of the mountain roads can be, especially in the dark, with the snow falling while you're straddling on the edge of a cliff. You could die if your car slips even a tiny bit. Anyways, he took this shortcut and then noticed something right outside his driver's side back window. There seemed to be a man following his car. He was confused, since he was in a vehicle, and how could this old man possibly keep up with him? Next, he made another big mistake. He stopped, parked his car, got out, and tried to see what the hell was going on. But he saw nothing. He circled back but still couldn't find anything, not even footprints on the ground. He thought he was just seeing things because of how tired he was, so he shook it off and got back in his car. After he began driving again, he looked in his rearview mirror. The old man was now sitting in his back seat, staring back at him through the reflection. He then blacked out. When he regained consciousness, he was on his way out of the mountain, seeing the sun rising in the distance. The old man was gone. Uncle had no clue how he was even alive after losing consciousness. By some miracle, he did not fall off the treacherous mountain roads. When he got home safely, he told his mom about what happened. His mom jokingly asked him what the old man looked like. My uncle then described him. From his facial features to his clothing, his mother looked utterly shocked. She then ran into a room, found an old photograph, and showed it to my uncle. "Was this the man you saw?" Uncle was surprised to see the man he saw in his car in the photograph. His mom began crying and told him it was her father, who had passed away before Uncle was even born. He had never seen him or his photo in the house before, since it was such a sad reminder for her. She thinks that her father was there to protect him from the dangerous mountain roads. Before this, Uncle said he did not believe in ghosts, because he was a man of science, a licensed surgeon with years of medical school under his belt. But what he experienced on the mountain that night has forever changed his perception.
This happened to a friend of mine who lived in the same neighborhood as me when we were about 8 or 9 years old. My friend E and her family lived just a few houses down the street from mine. We lived in a neighborhood where almost everyone knew each other. The biggest worry we ever had was that some outsider would come into the neighborhood and cause trouble. Some people left their homes unlocked because we felt that safe. There was an incredibly nice family that lived directly across the street from E's house. A mom, a dad, a 16-year-old son, and their other mentally challenged son, who was about 22 years old. I'll call him Tim. Tim was always home because he wasn't employed due to his disability, but his parents were working full-time and his brother had school. All day, every day, he would be outside waving and smiling at anyone who drove or walked by. Big smiles showing all his teeth and sometimes giggling, just out of pure excitement and happiness of interacting with other people, since he spent most of his time alone. He was not creepy at all. One day, E was sick and didn't go to school. Even though she was about 8 or 9 years old, E was allowed to stay home sick by herself. Plus, her mom was going to be home around 2 anyways, since she only worked part-time, and the neighborhood was safe. E locked all the doors, except the one that led into the garage. They used this as their front door because it was easier in those cookie-cutter homes to just open the garage, pull in, get out of the car, close the garage, and walk into their house through the unlocked door that led from the inside of the garage to the inside of their home. This is obviously not the safest way to protect your home from intruders, but we literally all did this. The worst part is they had an outside cat and kept the garage door cracked just enough for him to get inside for his food or shelter, if he needed to. So E is asleep, feeling sick with a fever. All the doors and windows are locked, except the door leading to the cracked garage door. Tim was bound to know that she was home alone, since he was outside the front of his house all the time. E wakes up to pounding on the front door. Startled, she walks downstairs and looks through the peephole. It's Tim. She cracks the door and he says something along the lines of how he notices everything and would guard her home since she is home alone. She says thanks, but there was no need to, and to have a nice day, and that it was beautiful weather. He looked pissed. He got angry and said, "You think I can't do it because I'm dumb? But you watch and see, 'cause me ain't dumb." She said sorry and didn't mean it like that, but she had to rest now. She dozed off and woke up to a noise downstairs in the kitchen, the room the door from the garage led into. She hadn't heard the garage door open, but she was sick, so she figured she was deep in sleep and just hadn't noticed. Completely disorientated from the time she looked over at the alarm clock, it was 10:20, way too early for her mom to be home. At that moment, she heard noises again downstairs. She didn't call out. She had been sleeping in her parents' bedroom and ran into their bathroom, slamming the door loudly. Then she remembered their bathroom door had no lock on it. The noise she made slamming the door alerted the intruder to where in the house she was at, and big footsteps started coming upstairs. She moved quickly and quietly to her parents' closet, which was on the other side of the big room. She closed the doors and hid behind some clothes, all the time thinking how someone would have gotten inside. She remembered that the garage door was cracked for the cat, slightly, but not close enough for a thin person to slip underneath. Tim walks into the bedroom. Tim is tall and thin. She can see him through the slatted closet doors. She sees him holding a knife and did everything she could to not scream. He quickly went to the master bathroom, where she was just moments before. These cookie-cutter houses only had about 3 floor plan layouts, so it wasn't hard for him to find. He looked inside the bathroom and didn't see her, then started making loud, throaty noises, like someone would do if they're frustrated and angry, while pacing the entire house. She stayed in the closet for hours, even after she heard him exit through the front door. She stayed until her mom got home. She was crying hysterically and told her mom what happened. Had she not been so upset, and had one of their kitchen knives had not been left by the front door, her mom might have blamed it on being delirious from a high fever, because nobody would expect Tim to do that. The police were called, and an official report was filed. I am not sure if he had any charges pressed against him, because after she told me the story once, she refused to talk about it again. I overheard her parents a few times talking about the situation to my parents, but never heard what the consequences were. E was so traumatized she went to therapy afterwards for several years and still wouldn't talk to anyone about it because she didn't want to remember or relive the experience. We even moved to an apartment together years and years later for college purposes. She never talked about Tim. It was like he never existed, and I never asked. I noticed she always locked the door that led to the patio and balcony, even though we were on the 7th level, and always locked her bedroom door, onto which she added an additional lock. And when she locked all these doors and the windows, she always checked 3 times. Every single time. I often wonder if there was more to the story than what E told me. We were kids after all, and sometimes kids don't know how to explain things they don't understand. It is terrifying to think about what his intentions were, and if he perhaps did find E, and something else happened. As horrifying as the experience must have been for her, it made a huge statement in the neighborhood for everyone to be more careful. I will always make sure everything is locked. It was 2009. I'm in high school and I'm a male. I live in an island where most people live near the coast, but my childhood house is deep in the mountains. Imagine a house in the woods, but at the very top of the mountain. The house is surrounded by thick mist every night, like in a bad horror movie, and the woods around it start less than 2 feet from the outer walls of our house. Our closest neighbor is about a 15-minute drive, and 5 minutes away there's an abandoned house. There's no streetlights, and there are all kinds of animals roaming the area. This is important to the story, because even though you couldn't see a group of 10 people hiding 1 meter away from you in the woods, you could hear absolutely everything up to a couple kilometers away. If we saw car lights or heard a car approaching, my family and I would turn off the lights and hide. I don't know why. Shy, antisocial, whatever you want to call it. I think that's enough to set my story up, but I'll add a little bit more detail that might be important. My house is small, but our family car was a good one. I don't know much about cars, but my dad always says that without a really good car, we wouldn't be able to go up and down the mountain we lived in. Also, there's currently 8 people living inside our house. This happened one night at about 11 p.m. So I'm at the dining table enjoying some cereal while I watch some anime, having the time of my life. The lights in the house were on, so nothing could be seen in the darkness outside. There's a window in front of me that faces the front of the house and the road. Something calls my attention, but I don't hear or see anything. Suddenly, I think I slightly see a human silhouette outside, but it's not moving. So I just ignore it as some effect of the lights in the house, or maybe my own reflection. More anime, more cereal. Then, I think I see something moving at the other side of the window, and this time, the silhouette is waving at me. I felt my heart jump out of my chest and I froze. There was a person outside, waving at me. After maybe 10 seconds, in which I had just looked up with a spoon halfway to my mouth, he decides to call out, "Hello, I need help." My parents hear him and approach the window, which made me sure I wasn't looking at a ghost. The man outside starts telling a story about how his car was stolen and he needs help. My parents are surprised that nobody heard his footsteps, so they whisper their theories among themselves. For the mysterious guy's story to be true, he had to have been mugged more than a mile away, gotten his car stolen, and then walked for half an hour in the dark through the woods, following the dim light of our house. My parents still decide to believe him, and they offer to call the police. Our visitor begs to say the stupidest thing he could have. "Don't call the police. I don't have a gun." My parents stay silent for a while. The guy outside knows that he messed up, but proceeds to make his request. "Can I please get a ride downtown?" My dad nervously chuckles and gives him an excuse. He mentions the time, the fact that he felt the guy was lying and that he had already called the police. This is when my favorite part of the story begins. I stand up from the table, shaking. I go to a closet, and even though I can't see the guy's face, I know he's following my actions. I grab 2 machetes that are half my size and run to the other room. I was terrified, and looking back, I probably took away the only weapons my parents could have used to protect themselves in case of an altercation. I opened a door to the room where my siblings and I sleep, and they were watching some silly show. My sisters are loud, and my younger brothers are 4 years old, 7 years old, and 9 years old, so their laughs are angelical by day and demonic by night. I signal at them to shut up, and they do so, joining me and my parents in our fear. There's silence, and then suddenly we hear the guy say, "It's okay if you can't help me. I'll go to the next house." My dad replies, "There's no next house. You should wait for the police here." "I don't need the police. I'm good." This goes back and forth. The guy is now in good shape to walk an hour down the mountain to reach downtown. My dad offers a rusty metal tricycle from our porch so that he can go downtown, as a joke. The guy accepts this offer and grabs the tricycle. I assume he just wanted to leave with something. This tricycle is 20 years old, and it definitely doesn't work. And this guy definitely wouldn't be able to ride it even if it did. We hear the screeching of the tricycle for a couple seconds as the stranger struggled to be able to ride it and then stopped not too far away from the house. It seemed like he stopped, and we didn't hear any footsteps that indicated the guy had left. After trying to identify if he was still in sight, to no avail, my dad calls the police. We wait in silence, looking at the road from the front windows. 15 minutes later, the police finally arrive, and as soon as the red and blue lights show up, they illuminate the entire road up to the abandoned house. The tricycle is sitting by itself on the road not too far away. The police claim not seeing anyone on the road, so they just took a look at the woods with a flashlight and called it a night. The cops were clearly freaked out by the eerie look of our house and did not stay more than 5 minutes. Nothing else happened that night. I slept with 2 machetes under my bed, which I remember angered one of my sisters. We have no idea who this person was. No carjackings were reported the next day, and even though a lot of weird things happen around my house, we never saw this guy again. It's pretty obvious he was up to no good, but there were a few things that we could never understand. Where did he come from? Where did he go? If his story was true, he had the worst luck in the world. I think the situation was interesting because I think about his point of view and our horror night turns a bit comical. I mean, imagine this. You go rob a house. Turns out the people inside speak calmly. There's a scrawny, seemingly mute kid that tries to be sneaky and grabbing some huge machetes and then hides somewhere in the darkness of the house. Then you hear children's laughter coming from a room and then absolute silence. I think we were lucky, but probably out-creeped this creep that night. I don't see any other reason for this guy to back out of his plans. The guy clearly had a gun and bad intentions, not to mention his ability to ninja walk through a forest, where we even hear wildcats walking around. Also, no neighbors witnessed or heard anything. I am sure some other person would have told this story better, but I gave it a shot. Obviously, I hope I never see this guy again, even though I wouldn't know if I did, because I never saw his face. This happened to me a couple of months ago now, but when it first happened, given how crazy it was, it took me a few weeks to collect myself enough to tell this story. It's relevant for me to tell you up front that I'm a military veteran, and I have PTSD and anxiety, as well as a pretty bad case of depression that I'm currently in my 3rd year of. I have read that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, can massively improve PTSD symptoms and in turn help to reduce anxiety. So I have been trying various techniques at home. The problem there is, my wife and I live in a small 2-bedroom ground floor flat with an upstairs neighbor with absolutely no concept of other people. A jock douchebag type who's a personal trainer, but he trains at home too, 'cause gains. You know, the kind of guy whose only 2 topics of conversation are protein powder and steamed rice. I'm sure you can imagine the type. With that being a constant issue, meditation and quiet mindfulness are just not possible with the constant noise. My solution to this was to do my normal routine during the day, but take advantage of my insomnia later on. At around 2300, I would put on my coat and my shoes, and as we lived near the beach, I figured I could walk to the beach now that there's pretty much no people around, walk on the sand and be mindful to the sounds of the ocean. Sounds nice, doesn't it? It was the first 2 times, but you know what they say, the third time's the charm. The walk to the beach from my home isn't that far, maybe a little over half a mile, but once I got there, I would walk to the very end of the beach until you reached the cliffs where there is a World War II artillery gun turret, which was another half mile-ish. Sometimes I would walk the path up the cliff to the gun and stare out into the blackness of the midnight ocean, which was only broken by the occasional flash of light from the lighthouse. I would sit and listen to the waves crashing against the cliffs. Sometimes I would close my eyes and just concentrate on nothing but that sound. I felt safe there, knowing I was alone, just me and the ocean. Usually before I turned tail and head home, I would walk down to a small row of benches. They are all marked with plaques in remembrance of someone who also came and enjoyed the view, although I imagine they came during the day. The benches are close to an old pub that was shut down years ago, and I had heard the place used to get used as a dogging site or a brothel or something back in the day. So when I saw vehicle headlights coming towards the pub, I figured it was some young lads trying to catch potential doggers at it. I sat on the bench and waited for the car to pass me, but as it rounded a bend in the road further up, I was momentarily lit up by the headlights. The headlights of the vehicle went off immediately, and the car went off-road and out of sight for a moment. At this point, I was fully alert and a bit cautious, so I dropped to one knee and ducked behind the bench I had been sitting on. The vehicle drove past me. It was only maybe 40 feet from me, and as the lighthouse illuminated the vehicle, I could now see it was an old beat-up Land Rover kind of vehicle, with crappy camo paint on the wings. At that moment, someone popped out of the top of the vehicle with a scoped rifle and a big torch. In that instant, in my head I was back in Iraq, and my senses felt razor sharp. I dropped onto my belt buckle and crawled into a patch of long grass adjacent to the benches. Then I got in position where I could see them, but they couldn't see me. The guy with the rifle shone his torch at the exact bench I had been sitting on, then the others, searching for me. He started looking all around him through the scope, looking for where I might have gone. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt as if I could hear it. I held my sleeve over my mouth to muffle the sound of my breathing, but more importantly, to try and hide the condensation of my breath. The vehicle started to move to get a better view of the benches, so I started slowly crawling towards the main road, as not only is there a row of houses, but an old stone bus stop I could take hard cover in if they saw me and opened fire. After about 5 minutes of hiding in the long grass, it started to rain, and they were still clearly looking for me, but were now about 150 feet away. The guy with the rifle was scanning around with his eye down the scope, so I waited until he was looking away for me to seize my moment and run for cover. I pushed my hands hard into the wet dirt to launch myself onto my feet. Then I sprinted towards the bus stop while throwing some zigs and zags in there, just in case they had seen me. Luckily they hadn't, and I was now far enough away that I could take out my phone and call the police. They were there with a riot van and a squad car in about 10 minutes, and as I was talking to the officers in the van, they spotted the gunner's vehicle and took off after them. The officers in the squad car stayed behind to talk to me. The rain was coming down in sheets by now. They asked me if I was absolutely sure it was a rifle, and I told them yes, I was 100%, no doubt in my mind at all. The officers both looked at each other, and then one of them asked, "And what exactly is your experience with firearms?" I told them I was ex-Army and I've seen my fair share of all kinds of firearms. They then asked me what I was doing there after midnight, which is a pretty fair question to be honest. I explained that quite ironically, I was taking a mindfulness walk to ease my PTSD symptoms. They were satisfied with that explanation, if not somewhat amused, and told me that the Armed Response Unit was en route. I asked if they needed me to stay behind and make a statement, but the officers told me not to bother waiting around, because they most likely wouldn't need to take a statement beyond the call I made. And also, it was pissing down with rain, so I should get home and get dry. It was over, but I still felt super wired, and my heart was still thumping hard in my chest. I started the walk home, and when I was about halfway there, a police helicopter buzzed overhead and settled over the area where I'd been sitting on the benches, with the searchlight going. It was right then, it hit me like a shotgun to the chest. That happened. That was real. And it was here. My head started swimming. My heart was pounding twice as hard now, and my legs felt like jelly. And my lungs felt glitchy. I couldn't breathe properly. I dropped to my knees, crying in the street in the pouring rain, the only light coming from a nearby street lamp with a flickering bulb. I was gasping for breath, thoughts flashing in my head, thinking that if I had stayed still, if I hadn't hunched behind the bench, if I had done any number of things differently, or hadn't, then I could have gurgled my last breath alone in the dark in the cold, wet dirt, and my wife would be none the wiser till the following day. I have no idea if they were even there for me, and if they were, how could they know I would be there? I had been twice before, I suppose. It's not like there's animals to hunt there beyond foxes. But why hunt foxes from a vehicle with a rifle and a torch at midnight? Anyway, I am not ashamed to say that that experience terrified me. I guess my army training helped me stay alert to stay hidden, but I don't really know. I don't go walking at night anymore, and I have the occasional nightmare about the whole thing.